Go back. Lilibet reached out her hand and gave Yunshi a gentle push. The next second, Yunshi began to fall down to the earth from the battlefield of gods. The battlefield of gods finally fulfilled its mission. It splintered like a mirror. Instead, an ice-blue portal stood over above the sky of the White Lotus Sword Domain. It was the door of the Sky Tower. The door connected all sword domains in the Sky Sword God's domain. In the next thousands of years, she would still stand on that beautiful and silent beach as ever, guarding the order of the Sky Tower and the Sky Sword God's domain. Compared with Golden Crow Princess's flying speed, the speed of Yunshi falling from the sky was much slower, but it was more realistic. Boundless land, mountains, and oceans appeared in Yunshi's vision and became clearer and clearer in his eyes. His body fell at a high speed, which even caused sparks in the atmosphere. It was impossible for his hero-ranked body to withstand the impact of falling directly from the sky to the ground. However, Yunshi was not afraid of it at all, because his body was being surrounded by silver-blue particles. Being protected by Lilibet's power was the best. He only felt the joy of going back home. The wet sea breeze and the familiar, beautiful scenery all seemed to say welcome back to Yunshi. Oh, he knew where the sense of familiarity came from now, because it was indeed the scenery he knew. Some hidden power in his body stretched out comfortably, releasing a happy atmosphere. The maid's dress automatically disappeared in the air and naturally became another set of clothes. On his face, a silver mask appeared, and above his head, a crown also naturally condensed. It was the mask belonging to the White Emperor. It was the crown belonging to the Water God's bride. The magnificent ruby. The clear sapphire. The profound black obsidian. The sacred moonstone. The colorful diamond. The golden crystal. The silver ice crystal. And a pair of ambers, which looked like a living sailing jellyfish and the butterfly of death. All the gemstones were shining, reflecting each other's color. The White Emperor was back. One sailing jellyfish after another flew in from all directions, and fell happily from the sky to the sea together with Yunshi. They were singing softly, praising the only emperor in this world. Even the infinite love from millions of people, it wouldn't be more than the love you have granted to him. You have the whole world, but you only love this boy. Even though the world would end in misfortune, you would only offer this boy honor and hope. Welcome back, bride of the great water god. Boom. With a loud sound, Yunshi dropped on the surface of the sea like a meteorite falling from the sky. One sailing jellyfish after another happily chased after Yunshi falling into the sea. The pressure of the sea water was nothing for these fantastic creatures. More than that, after Yunshi fell into the sea, the butterflies of death also came and followed behind Yunshi together with sailing jellyfish. Oh, it's so deep, it's so deep. Is this the deep sea? Yunshi watched his body falling uncontrollably in a straight line, and within a few breaths, he had fallen into the deepest and darkest side of the sea where he couldn't even see his fingers. After a while, the sailing jellyfish also arrived near him. Fortunately, these jellyfish were self-luminescent so he could barely see the environment around him through the cold lights from the bodies of the sailing jellyfish. It was probably already several kilometers deep under the surface of the sea, but there were a variety of unusual species living here. Two kinds of marine life inhabited this sea area. They were either very flat, adjusting the internal and external pressure with a soft body, or developed towards another direction, having a huge body and size. Among them, there were very few creatures that were also self-luminescent, for example, a numbfish whose body was wrapped in azure lightning not far away from Yunshi. Why did Yunshi know the name of this creature? Because one of his 1,000,000 brides was the princesses of the numbfish race. Diving to the deeper sea area, Yunshi saw more rare races that hardly appeared in front of human beings. If it wasn't because he had married the princesses of all these races, he would never know that there were so many strange creatures inhabiting such a deep sea area. Lilibet's power was still protecting him and it didn't seem like it would disappear anytime soon. 10,000 meters, 20,000 meters, Yunshi had never entered such a deep sea area. Was the sea so deep in the past? Yunshi remembered that when he erected the 4 towers in the 4 corners of the water god's world, the sea wasn't so deep at that time and the number of the species that habitat here were far fewer than the number they were now. He had a feeling that this was growing, not only the scale of the world, but also the strength of the creatures in this world. Along the way, Yunshi has seen dozens of powerful hero-ranked deep-sea monsters. In the battle with Shea Longness, he didn't see any of them at that time. They seem to have appeared overnight in this deep-sea area. Looking at the sailing jellyfish and butterflies of death around him, Yunshi could be sure that this wasn't just his imagination. The number of the two unique fantastic creatures around him had become 2 times more than what he knew when he just left the water god's world. Moreover, there were still more sailing jellyfish flying to this place from all directions, while more and more butterflies of death emerged from the deepest darkness. The sailing jellyfish represented life. The butterfly of death represented death. The two kinds of fantastic creatures had different postures, but they had the same beauty. They were the symbols of the power of the water god's world. They were proof of Hydra's identity as a god. Their number was increasing, which meant that the aggregate of the water god's fantasy island was expanding. It wasn't his imagination, it was because Hydra was recovering her strength step by step after waking up from the long dream. She was the world, so any changes that happened to her body would naturally change the world at the same time. As she recovered, a lot of creatures who disappeared during the sleeping period had emerged into this world again. After protecting this broken world for thousands of years, Hydra finally harvested the fruits that belonged to her. As the bride of the water god, Yunshi had also become one of the harvesters. After dropping into the water god's world, he was accepted and embraced by this world like a child who just returned to his mother's arms. The world was welcoming its child, the little white emperor. Yunshi didn't know how deep he had sunk into the deep sea. He could not even tell whether it was 80,000 meters deep or 100,000 meters deep. In a word, it had exceeded the limit that could be observed. At last, the deep-sea races around him had become scarce once again. Everything had become quiet. Only the transparent sailing jellyfish and the butterflies of death still accompanied him. Finally, Yunshi arrived at the end. His body seemed to have touched some very soft thing. The silver-blue particles that were protecting him dispersed without a sound, then Yunshi's whole body was plunged into a soft and familiar breath. There seemed to be a soft laugh echoed into his ear. It was the gaze of a great being, who opened her eyes quietly and was full of warm smiles on her face. Hydra, the water god. Yunshi naturally understood what this soft thing was. It was the source of Hydra's power, an endless ocean of blood. Here was the god world of Hydra. In other words, this was actually a part of Hydra's body. Perhaps there was no safer place in the White Lotus Sword domain than this place was for Yunshi. Lilibet had indeed thrown him into the safest shelter in the whole of the White Lotus Sword domain. Passing through a wide passage, Yunshi finally stood on the ground again. Yunshi looked doubtfully at the vast mountain range in front of him. In his sight, there were only mountains at the bottom of the sea, and the outlines of these mountains looked strange. From Yunshi's point of view, the mountains seemed to have their own life, releasing a mysterious and ancient atmosphere. Yunshi reacted with awe in the face of this holy land. But the next second, the sound of a hurricane whistling completely interrupted Yunshi's thought. Hiccup. It was a tremor that was loud enough to trigger a small earthquake. All of the mountains rolled up, releasing earth-shattering shockwaves. Yunshi's body was blown down. If it wasn't because the sailing jellyfish around him blocked most of the shockwaves for Yunshi, he still wouldn't be able to stand up. Can it be? It was not easy for Yunshi to control the mist in the air, but he was more shocked by the mountains in front of him. In the blink of an eye, the tremendous earthquake completely changed the shape of the mountains. The whole world was turned upside down. No, the earth wasn't being overturned. Stepping onto the fog created by the White Emperor's mask, Yunshi flew to the highest point of this unknown world, and finally witnessed the full view of the mountains. They weren't mountains. They were all parts of a giant creature's body. The giant creature turned over in its sleep, which triggered this earth-shattering disaster. And Yunshi actually knew who this giant creature was. It was the first fantastic creature who arrived at the water god's world, Ouroboros. But now, Ouroboros' body had grown to a size that was large enough to devour a star, so Yunshi didn't relate the mountains to the concept of living things at all. He remembered that before he left the water god's world, Ouroboros' body was only 1,000th the size of this mountain. Maybe this was Ouroboros' true body? When it first appeared in the sky above the water god's world, it shrank its body. Somehow, Yunshi thought that this might be the truth. As a strong fantastic creature, it wasn't surprising to know that Ouroboros had such a big body. Fantastic creatures were the favorites of the rules of the world, and some of them were even the incarnations of some certain rules. A human's common sense meant nothing to fantastic creatures. Yunshi's reasoning was soon proved to be true. In just a moment, the mountains changed their postures 3 times. Every combination of the mountains looked disorderly, but also seemed to contain some old, mysterious rules. Without exception, every change of Ouroboros' posture would lead to a catastrophe equivalent to a magnitude 9 earthquake. Shock waves alone could cause a doomsday scene. But for Ouroboros, it was just a normal rollover during sleep, and it didn't seem to sleep well at this moment. Hiccup, ha. With these vague sounds, Ouroboros rolled over in its sleep. Not everyone had the luck to witness a fantastic creature's sleeping posture. Fortunately, Yunshi's body was equipped with the sailing jellyfish robe, the White Emperor's mask and the Water God Bride's crown. The 3 god weapons represented the blessing of the water god's world to him. Equipped with these god weapons, he could summon millions of mist souls and ask for the help of the 2 fantastic creatures, sailing jellyfish and butterfly of death. In this state, even if he had to face Shea Longness again, he had the power to fight against her. Although he could only hold this fighting power in the water god's world, for now, it was enough. The earthquakes caused by Ouroboros could do no harm to him. Not only Ouroboros, but Yunshi also sensed a familiar aura from the end of the mountains. Compared to Drunken Ouroboros, that aura was more scorching. Teacher Cassina? Yunshi looked at the end of the mountain in some surprise. He didn't expect that Teacher Cassina would also be here. Speaking of her, after he finished his 100 victories in the Sky Tower, he should report it to Teacher Cassina and return her identity to her. When he first entered the Starry Sky chessboard, he had no idea about how valuable this identity was. Until he finally found out that all his opponents were at the legend rank, he realized what a special gift it was. A legend-ranked person's identity. No one else could enjoy this treatment in the White Lotus Sword domain. Without Teacher Cassina's identity, he wasn't even qualified to step into the Sky Tower. Cassina must have great expectations for him, so she gave him her identity and let him go to take part in the competition on the Starry Sky chessboard. Without Teacher Cassina's help, he could never obtain the title the Master of Stargo. Between the sky and earth, there was a tragic scream. Ouroboros suddenly made a painful howl as if it was being excruciatingly tortured by some invisible executioner. Why? Yunshi didn't know what he could do. Is there anything in this world could do harm to such a giant snake, a mountain-like fantastic creature? It hurts. It hurts. Anyone, give me water. Ouroboros rolled over painfully. If it wasn't because it was in Hydra's body, the damage caused by it could already destroy a mortal world. Water. 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 I see. Oh, my, drink some water and get up. Somehow, Cassina's voice sounded a little distorted, and then a light column shot up to the sky. A big mouth appeared in the sky and tens of millions of tons of seawater fell from the sky, bombarding on Ouroboros' lifeless body. Ouch! 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 Ouroboros made a dying cry and rolled over the ground and began to smoke all over its body. Toxic gas. Yunshi smelled the horror toxin that was spreading in the air. The toxic gas could kill millions of people at once, but he had a familiar feeling when smelling it. He knew that he would not be harmed by the toxic gas. Because this toxic gas was from the master of this world, Hydra. It was the poison from Hydra that pervaded in the air at this moment. Just a drop of Hydra's poison could kill a group of the strongest hero-ranked people. If a few drops of her poison transformed into toxic gases, they could even wipe out all the living beings in a sword domain. However, there seemed to be something else mixed up in the toxic gas. Is it the aroma of wine? Yunshi sniffed and analyzed the bouquet in the air. As a hero-ranked baker, he could judge all kinds of food, including wine. After all, There was also wine bread such as red wine bread and rum toast. However, because people in the White Lotus Sword domain didn't like to eat bread mixed with wine, Yunshi hadn't really made this kind of bread before. Ingredients: wine brewed from an unknown liquid, highly poisonous. Level: unknown. Brewing time: unknown. Effectiveness: very horrible poisonous wine, no hero-ranked beings can drink. Not for humans. He couldn't analyze out too many things. The only thing he knew was that this kind of wine was extremely poisonous and could poison millions of people with a single drop. If you made bread with this poisonous wine, he could easily kill any hero-ranked person. After drinking such a poisonous wine, Ouroboros could still struggle to look for water. Are all fantastic creatures' bodies so strong? Gu. Ah. Ouroboros uttered a tearful groan and still murmured, again, one more drink. Good, one more drink. It seemed that Cassina was jubilantly pouring wine for the dying Ouroboros. Yunshi curiously controlled the mist, flying to the end of the mountain, which was actually the location of Ouroboros' head. Not surprisingly, he saw teacher Cassina and an unknown woman there. Although he had never seen this mature woman, who wore only a transparent robe on her body, Yunshi subconsciously knew that she was one of Hydra's best friends, the real body of the mountains under their feet, Ouroboros. Her whole body was wet, and under the wet robe, her beautiful body was clear and distinct. The wet hair sticking on the skin made her look more charming. Her eyes looked as if there were broken stars flashing in her pupils. Although her face looked feeble, her appearance showed a decadent beauty. In her hand, she was holding a glass of bloody wine, and she was trying to drink it. At this moment, she was so drunk that she couldn't even hold the glass of wine. She splashed most of the wine on her fragrant, smooth, round, firm, snow-white and delicate peaks. The bright red poisonous wine dropped on her snow-white skin. It looked like a magic painting that Yunshi could barely break his eyes away from. Whoop! What a waste! Ouroboros looked at the poisonous wine falling onto her breasts. She directly pulled open her robe and gently stretched out her tongue, licking the liquor that hadn't yet completely fallen down from her skin. The poisonous wine that could kill millions of people shone brilliantly under Ouroboros' fragrant tongue. The beautiful scene was so seductive that Yunshi didn't know where to look at this time. On the opposite side of Ouroboros, Cassina was also drunk. Although she was not as drunk as Ouroboros, her flushed cheeks revealed her hazy state. Her brown slender legs had long been free from the hindrance of shoes and socks. On the round and beautiful toes and the bows of the feet, they were full of bright red wine. A few drops of bright red wine fell from Cassina's lips to the instep of her feet, attracting Ouroboros' eyes. Wine, Ouroboros licked her lips and kissed Cassina's smooth ankle. Cassina's beautiful toes, soles, foot arch, as long as they were stained with wine beads, Ouroboros licked them all clean and didn't let go of a drop of wine. Looking at the beautiful bare feet, Yunshi's heart suddenly beat faster. You're too drunk. Ouroboros. Cassina drank another glass of poisonous wine without batting an eyelid, then kicked Ouroboros with her toes. Let me die. Ouroboros sank down beside Cassina's ankle with a lifeless look. Even with such a decadent look, her body still naturally emitted a seductive charm. Hot, after drinking another glass of poisonous wine, it seemed that Cassina had also reached a critical point of her drinking capacity. She stabbed her sword, the sands of time, into the ground. Cassina shook her head and was going to take off her clothes to dissipate heat. Anyway, they were in Hydra's secret wine store. Apart from her and Ouroboros, there were no other people. Ah. Yunshi stared at teacher Cassina skillfully taking off her clothes. Why are you so skillful? Compared with Ouroboros' morbid state, Cassina's skin showed a different beauty, healthy and flexible. Moreover, she had a pair of long legs that could make anyone envy. Looking at the snow-white skin and brown skin, the world in Yunshi's eyes suddenly became blurred, and he vaguely heard a slight laugh from nowhere. Yunshi looked dully at Cassina, who was slowly taking off her clothes. There was still some liquor on her skin, which made his mouth dry and almost couldn't believe his eyes. He knew that teacher Cassina indeed loved to drink, however, he never saw her getting drunk before. He saw it with his own eyes that even after drinking 10 barrels of wine, teacher Cassina's face only became blushed a little. She would never be so drunk that she had to take off her clothes to dissipate heat. Is it because of the wine? Yunshi smelled the bouquet of the wine in the air. It was indeed a good wine that even his hero-ranked food identification capability couldn't identify. Think about it carefully, even Ouroboros, whose body was as large as a star, was drunk after drinking the wine. It wasn't surprising to see Teacher Cassina also getting drunk. No wonder that when he returned from the Sky Tower, he didn't find Teacher Cassina. She actually came here to drink. Did she forget that he had to report to her about his 100 victories in a row on the starry sky chessboard? No, that can't be. Yunshi shook his head and ran to Cassina, stopping her from taking off her bra. White Emperor. Cassina squinted her eyes and raised her finger to shake between her eyes, as if she was measuring the distance between herself and Yunshi. Teacher Cassina, you are drunk. Yunshi accidentally touched Cassina's smooth back, which made his heart suddenly beat faster. Drink. Oh, it seems that I drank too much. Cassina touched Yunshi's forehead and pinched his face. Why do I feel like you have grown up? She asked with a puzzled look. Really? Yunshi looked at his own body. He couldn't find any parts that had grown up. Silly boy. I mean, you have become stronger. Cassina took a deep breath. Instantly, the alcohol in her whole body was forced to be dissipated bit by bit. This was a waste. For legend-ranked beings, only very few materials could affect the states of their bodies. Taking Cassina as an example, although she liked wine, all wines that hadn't been stored more than 100 years were actually as flavorless as water. No matter how good the brewing material was and how high the grade of the winemaker was, if there was no trace of time in the wine, she couldn't taste anything from the wine. To great existences such as Cassina and Ouroboros, only the wine that had been stored more than 1,000 years could make them feel physically and mentally pleasant. And the wine that could make them get drunk was even rarer in the endless gods' domains. Amongst all the wines in the world, Hydra's poisonous wine, which was brewed with her own venom and had been stored thousands of years, could be called the highest-ranked enjoyment in the endless gods' domains. Otherwise, Ouroboros and Cassina wouldn't be so drunk that they forgot the time to go back and almost could not wake up. Hydra wasn't just a water god, she was also a legend-ranked winemaker. Even back to the age of the gods, this was a rare career. Only the strongest legend-ranked beings could enjoy the poisonous wine made of her own blood and venom. Cassina had come to Hydra's treasury to look for something useful for Yunshi's future. As a result, she encountered Ouroboros and was tempted by her words, sneaking into Hydra's wine cellar together. Fortunately, compared to Ouroboros, Cassina's drinking capacity was big. After stealing and drinking countless barrels of Hydra's poisonous wine, she was still not totally drunk, so that Yunshi could awaken her. Good. That's all right. After dispelling about half of the alcohol in her body, Cassina's eyes became clear again. As for why she didn't dispel all the alcohol in her body, because it was Hydra's legend-ranked poisonous wine, it would be a great pity if she dispelled all of it. She clearly knew that she may not have another chance to sneak into Hydra's wine cellar and steal her wine again. White Emperor, have you completed the challenge in the Sky Tower? When Cassina wasn't drunk, she was a very serious and responsible teacher. At the first moment, she asked Yunshi about his test in the Sky Tower. Thank you, Teacher Cassina. I have successfully achieved 100 victories in a row. Yunshi proudly stretched out his hand and showed her the 2 shining soul jades in his palm. I won 2 soul jades as my reward. Cassina looked cheerfully at the 2 soul jades. Soul jade of innocence. The owner can store his memory in the jade. Even if the owner's existence was totally wiped off from the universe, his memory in the soul jade wouldn't disappear. Soul jade of holy light. Put on this soul jade and you can obtain a light-type talent. Good, he did well. He deserves to be my disciple. Not only is he physically gifted, but he is also very lucky. Soul Jades has only a 10% possibility to appear to be a reward. He could actually obtain 2 top-class Soul Jades as the reward. Wait a minute, 2 top-class Soul Jades? Cassina showed a doubtful expression on her face. In the Battle Gods Championship contest, everyone would get a reward after achieving 100 victories in a row. Cassina had achieved countless victories in the Sky Tower, but she only obtained Soul Jades as rewards several times. Yoon not only obtained 2 soul jades as rewards, but also both of them were top-class soul jade. It's incredible. White Emperor, how many times have you achieved 100 victories in a row? Just once, I achieved 100 victories in a row on the Starry Sky chessboard and chose the 2 soul jades as my reward. Yoon innocently looked at Cassina. Ha! The Starry Sky chessboard? You went to the Starry Sky chessboard? Cassina was speechless. Yes, and I also got the title of the Master of Stargo. Yoon was an honest child. At least, he had no intentions of lying in front of Cassina. The Master of Stargo? Cassina suddenly wondered if she had been drunk and slept in Hydra's wine cellar for several years. Is the Starry Sky chessboard a place for any people with a healthy mental state? TU. What equipment did you use? Cassina was trying hard to think about what equipment could help her disciple to participate in the game of the Starry Sky chessboard. However, although she had won innumerable legend-ranked equipment in the Battle Gods Championship contest, she really didn't know which equipment could be useful in this situation. Her disciple hadn't even stepped across the door of the hero rank yet. How could he enter the Starry Sky chessboard? Equipment. Does it exist? Yoon looked at his teacher innocently. He had never entered the Battle Gods Championship contest, so he didn't know that his teacher had prepared countless legend-ranked equipment for him there. For example, there were weapons called Infinity Edge. After equipping 6 Infinity Edges, they would combine into a killing suit, which could make the equipper's critical strike chance reach 120%. Or after equipping 6 Black Cleavers, the Black Cleaver Alliance suit could reduce your opponent's defense to 0. 6 Thornmails could combine into a Bloody Barrier suit, which could reflect back the opponent's attack with 180% magic power. 6 Frozen Hearts could combine into a Ice Crown suit, which had an ice-sealed aura that could reduce the attack speed of nearby enemies by 99%. In addition to these, there was also a Firestone suit made of 6 Boots of Mobility could let the equipper flash around the earth. Any of these suits were rare legend-ranked equipment. If Yoon equipped them all, he would be literally invincible in the Sky Tower. That's why Cassina was confident that even a newbie like Yoon could achieve 100 consecutive victories in the Battle Gods Championship contest. However, she didn't expect that he would go to the Starry Sky chessboard. She thought carefully and remembered that there were indeed equipment that could increase the wearer's intelligence. Are you sure that you didn't use the Little Red Riding Hood suit? Cassina vaguely remembered that amongst all the suits she had, there was indeed a Little Red Riding Hood suit made by combining 6 Banksys Deathcaps. A Banksys Deathcap could increase magic power by 120 points and raise mental power by 35%. And after combining 6 Banksys Deathcaps, the Little Red Riding Hood suit had 3 effects. 1. This suit can increase the equipper's magic power by 1,000 points and raise the equipper's mental power by 500%. 2. The equipper will be transformed into a 14-year-old golden-haired girl witch, who can cause 3 times hit to any dark-type creatures. 3. The equipper's attributes to werewolves are weakened and the attributes of vulnerability to wild animals are acquired. Warning: the girl with Little Red Riding Hood needs to keep their distance from the uncaged wrath of Zorn. Cassina had experimented with this suit before. After wearing this suit, the equipper would automatically trigger the transformation effect and gain powerful magic power. Moreover, it was a rare equipment that had 0 requirement for the equipper's rank. However, only a pure girl can equip this suit, and once you put it on, you couldn't take it off for a lifetime unless you had found a more powerful suit than this suit. That was to say, if you were chosen by this suit, you would become a 14-year-old golden-haired girl for a lifetime. Therefore, this suit also had a nickname 14 years old forever. It was said that it was made by a god in the ancient age. In addition to the Little Red Riding Hood suit, that god also made a lot of other equipment based on his fantasies, such as glass shoes with infinite melody, crystal crown of eternal sleeping, pumpkin carriage shuttling the world and 7 matches of mortal prayer. No. Yoon looked at his teacher in confusion. After he entered the Sky Tower, he went directly to the Starry Sky chessboard. Where was the equipment from? Oh, can it be, you didn't go to the Battle Gods Championship contest? Looking at her disciple's confused expression, Cassina finally discovered the truth. She seemed to have forgotten to tell him that he should go to the Battle Gods Championship contest after entering the Sky Tower. For her, it was common sense to go straight to the Battle Gods Championship contest. Besides the Battle Gods Championship contest, where else in the Sky Tower does she need to go? It seemed that her disciples didn't have this common sense. Well, I took part in the test of the Starry Sky chessboard and won 100 times. I didn't plan to stop after obtaining 100 victories, but the Sky Tower told me that I had obtained the title the Master of Stargo. She honestly told his teacher everything that happened before. Starry Sky chessboard. 100 victories in a row. A drop of sweat fell down from Cassina's forehead. Again, she wondered how long she had been drinking. How many years have passed? Even my disciple has obtained the title the Master of Stargo. The Master of Stargo is a title that isn't inferior to my own title of the Battle God. If people knew that the new Master of Stargo is such a little guy, they will, well, every force in the endless God's domains will want to grab my little disciple away from me. Well, White Emperor, how many people know that you are the Master of Stargo? Cassina couldn't help but pinch Yunshi's cheeks again. This pleasant surprise was so great that it almost became a scare. Apart from you, only the Guardian of the Sky Tower knows it. That's good. Remember, you must keep it a secret before you reach the legend rank. Cassina hesitated for a while and warned her lovely disciple, otherwise, there will be many terrible elder sisters that will try to talk to you and try to take you away, by the way. This wasn't a lie. If Yunshi's identity was exposed, countless forces would try to obtain him at all costs. The secret of the stars was still a great temptation to countless legend-ranked beings. Chapter 559, The Etiquette of the Battle God. 1. It's strange, why didn't I find that he was such a gifted Stargo player before? No, he couldn't be simply called genius, even if he was a super genius. It was too incredible to win the title of Master of Stargo at such an age. When you played Stargo, what did it feel like? Cassina was really curious about how her youngest disciple could beat so many legend-ranked wise men on the Starry Sky chessboard, a place where she didn't even dare to set foot in once. It's very simple. The rules of Stargo are very simple and easy to understand. She bluntly expressed his feelings. From the beginning to the end, he was enjoying the game. He was extremely grateful to teacher Cassina, because if she hadn't lent him her identity, he would have never been able to enter the Sky Tower and he probably would never have known that there was such an interesting game in the world. Simple. Cassina recalled her experience when Orfina tried to teach her the rules of Stargo. Every move on the chessboard must be done after thinking twice, and as time went by, the requirements on the player's calculating power would become higher and higher. Eventually, even most common legend-ranked beings couldn't withstand the pressure. All players must advance gradually and entrench themselves at every step. As one of the oldest trials in the Seven Towers, countless people couldn't even pass the entrance test. Otherwise, the Starry Sky chessboard wouldn't be recognized as the stage of the highest wisdom in the endless God's domains. Orfina was one of the fanatics who would even forget to eat and sleep when playing Stargo. As for her, she just looked at the rules of Stargo and had known that it wasn't a game for her. To put it bluntly, she could easily beat down 3 Orfina in the Battle Gods Championship contest. However, even if there were 100 of herself, it was impossible to overcome Orfina on the Starry Sky chessboard. Orfina the Ruby Princess, God of Wisdom, Black Mage, Duke Rome, Cyber Elf Alpha. Although she had never participated in the trial of the Starry Sky chessboard, she clearly knew these names, apart from Cyber Elf Alpha. The Ruby Princess, the Pearl of the Dragon God's domain, the wise dragon of Star Gemstone, the daughter of Dragon God, her best friend Orfina. The God of Wisdom, one of the oldest gods in the Western God's domain and one of the survivors from the Twilight of the Gods. Black Mage, Lord of the Sea of Chaos, the High Priest of the Dark Church, one of the most famous members of the Dark Council. Duke Rome, the Warlord of the Rome God's domain, the leader of the famous Sacred Legion in the Western God's domain. As a result, Cyber Elf Alpha defeated all of these legendary people, and her cute disciple defeated Cyber Elf Alpha by an overwhelming advantage. Teacher Cassina, this sort of stimulus is too strong. Chapter 560, The Etiquette of the Battle God, 2, Don't be nervous. It's just foreplay. The formal one hasn't started yet. Cassina cocked her head, wondering why she had such a strong reaction. The tremor of his muscles was clearly beyond the range that could be called normal. She remembered that when she taught this skill, the etiquette of the battle god, to her other disciples, they all gritted their teeth and endured it. The most exaggerated one even bit through the towel in her mouth. Is it too exciting for him? When she taught other disciples it, they had already reached the hero rank, but she had not yet taken that crucial step. No, that's not the problem. She sat down on she's body, reached out her hand and pinched his ankle, then touched around his foot. Oh, this hand feel. Not to mention common hero-ranked people, even all of her previous disciples didn't have such a perfect body. Ah! she screamed because Cassina just held one of she's feet and flicked her fingertips gently in the center of his foot. Gah! After a severe pain, she felt a numbing pain shooting straight from his foot to the top of his head, and that indescribable part became harder and hotter. That kind of sweet, sour, and soft feeling almost made she fly above the heaven and also dropped him into the abyss. He felt extreme pain and happiness at the same time. Teacher Cassina, is this really a part of the practice? She gritted his teeth and tried to shift his attention desperately. 1 little rabbit, 2 little rabbits, 3 little rabbits, that snow-white lovely rabbit. Oh, that obedient little rabbit is making all kinds of attractive gestures in front of me. Whoop, whoop. No. I shouldn't imagine this scene. This is not what a gentleman should do. It's incredible. What medicine did you take? Cassina patiently held she's foot with her palm and her fingertips kept drawing circles on the sole of his foot. Again, she wondered if she had drunk so much in Hydra's wine store that she had forgotten the passage of time. If it was really the same as my lovely disciple said, she's body had become a perfect body that had both of the advantages of rigid body and soft body, but how could it be possible? No human could have such a terrible talent, combining the advantages of soft body and rigid body. Even she herself mastered this after practicing many, many years. Where was his rigid body from? She knew that she's soft body was a blessing from Hydra, but where did his rigid body come from? His rigid body was one of the top-ranked bodies, diamond body. If anyone had a diamond body, that person could learn and master the skill superarmor easily. To the people who didn't have the diamond body, even the most talented people must spend dozens of years to learn the skill superarmor. Have you met any fantastic creatures or gods recently? Cassina asked. She was sure that she hadn't had such a talent before the last time she saw him. Therefore, he must have just obtained the diamond body a few days ago. Oh, I have met a lot of fantastic creatures and gods recently. She forced himself to restrain the boiling desire in his heart. Yes, it was a naked desire. He felt that the desire was going to drive him into a beast at any moment. Teacher Cassina, I can't hold on. I see. Cassina remembered that her lovely disciple just defeated a lot of fantastic creatures and gods on the starry sky chessboard. Who did it? Who granted him this talent? Doesn't the god know that this isn't a good thing? It's like pulling up seedlings to help them grow. Now, she had to help him redesign his training plan. What a luxurious annoyance, to have such a gifted disciple. She pulled she's feet up and stuck them to her chest. Cassina began to adjust her breathing. She was puzzled at the beginning, wondering what his feet had touched. When he came to his senses, his cheeks turned red instantly and his toes trembled uncontrollably. He could clearly feel the warm and slippery touch from his feet. That size, that softness, anyone who had experienced them at any time before would never mistake them. She suddenly had a general concept about the limit of soft body. It was too wonderful of a feeling, he knew that he could never forget it. Don't be afraid. I'll try to be gentle. Cassina's cheeks were a little red, but that was because she was still drunk. Her 10 fingers straightened she's toes one by one, and then kneaded his toes one by one. Each kneading would send a burning force into she's body. Hot. It's so hot, in all senses. she's blood was boiling. Cassina, what are you doing? At this moment, Ouroboros woke up and looked at them with her hazy eyes. She seemed to be awakened by some great mysterious will. Walking, she stumbled to Yunshi. Without even raising his head, Yunshi could see that under the long transparent robe, a pair of snow-white peaks were close at hand. Ouroboros. Don't make trouble. Cassina grabbed Yunshi's feet with both her hands and shook his body skillfully. Yunshi's body shivered all over. Teacher Cassina was so fierce. His whole spine was moaning and groaning, and that part of his body was becoming more vigorous. Hiccup. What an interesting face. Ouroboros didn't recognize who Yunshi was. She giggled and moved her face close to Yunshi's. Little guy. Where did you come from? Chapter 561. The Etiquette of the Battle God. 3:0. I am Teacher Cassina's disciple. For some reason, looking at Ouroboros' drunken face, Yunshi had a foreboding. As Ouroboros' snow-white face moved closer and closer, the ominous presentiment became stronger and stronger. Oh, what a lovely little guy. Cassina, will you give him to me? Ouroboros pinched Yunshi's cheeks and just didn't let go of him. No, don't even think about it. Cassina resolutely rejected her request. My disciple is destined to step on the highest stage of the Battle Gods Championship contest. If Yunshi followed Ouroboros, his only future was to become a disabled person, because Ouroboros was such a disabled snake that owed a lot of debt and had to sneak around and hide. The only thing that Ouroboros is good at is divination, but this is her natural talent. Even if she wanted to teach other people how to do it, she couldn't find any successful methods. In order to not make Yunshi become another person as disabled as Ouroboros, Cassina didn't mind breaking Ouroboros' spine to teach her a lesson. Oh, stingy Cassina. Ouroboros' real body rolled over on the ground, making the earth tremble and the mountain sway. Hey, how about, let's elope, go to a god's domain that nobody can find together, and eat and drink happily there all day. Ouroboros tried to abduct Yunshi. Shuffle. With a sound, Cassina's fingertip brandished in the air, and a jet of blood shot up to the sky. I'm dying. I'm dying. Ouroboros screamed, because Cassina's fingertip just cut off the tip of its tail. Just in time. You don't mind letting me borrow your blood, right? Cassina glanced at the tip of Ouroboros' tail. Although the blood gushed out from the wound was enough to fill a lake, Ouroboros' true body was as big as a star. The wound was actually barely worth mentioning to Ouroboros. The harm was even lighter than the toxicity of Hydra's poisonous wine. Open your arms and lay on the ground, Cassina said in an indisputable tone, ordering Yunshi to change his posture. The source of heaven and earth. Reverse. Her legs were separated and almost perfectly attached to Yunshi's separated hands. Cassina raised her head slowly and laid her hands on Yunshi's belly, where the blood and energy in his body converged. A huge amount of free energy in the air mixed with Ouroboros' blood and a hint of wine converged towards Cassina's hands. Hot. It's hot. Yunshi felt that his blood was going to explode. Countless hot streams ran through his body like snakes, and then followed a specific route to transfer back and forth in his body. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. With a huge sound of heartbeat, Yunshi's blood was running at a frenzied speed in his body. And a special part of his body also went ballistic. Yunshi was so glad that he was lying on the ground. Otherwise, he was afraid that his pillar would prop up the sky. Just when Yunshi thought he was at his limit, Cassina suddenly exhaled, and all the energy began to revolve around Yunshi's belly and forming a huge whirlpool. The magnificent of sky dance. Several blood-colored jewels appeared in Cassina's palms and then began to construct a blood-colored crystal at high speed. This was the gift Cassina prepared for Yunshi, a seed that could activate her power in his body when he was facing a life-or-death crisis. This was the core of the etiquette of the battle god's seed. Yunshi once obtained a similar seed from the green hippo, but compared to Cassina's seed, it was nothing. The green hippo's seed was just a disposable consumable. The battle god's seed not only contained Cassina's power, but also could slowly absorb the free energy in the air to recover itself. That was to say, it can be used as many times as Yunshi wanted. At first, Cassina planned to give Yunshi this seed after he reached the hero rank and started to travel around the endless gods' domains. But after knowing that she would face a crisis that may cause his death in the near future, Cassina decided to put the seed into Yunshi's body in advance. In order to let Yunshi's body become strong enough to withstand the power of the seed, Cassina came to Hydra's treasury and paid a huge price, so that she could obtain the precious blood crystal of Hydra, which would be used as the carrier of the battle god's seed. However, it was just that Yunshi's body grew faster than Cassina imagined. After obtaining Miu Miu's diamond body, he had leapt over the most difficult part. "Oh, it looks like I can seal more stuff into his body." Cassina smiled and began to transform more of Ouroboros' blood into energy and pour them into Yunshi's body. It would become a trump card to save Yunshi's life. Naturally, the stronger it was, the better it was. She didn't want such a gifted disciple to die 3 months later. With the soul jades to protect Yunshi's soul and the battle god's seed to protect his body, Cassina believed that even if Yunshi was facing a legend-ranked enemy, he could easily find a way to survive. "It hurts. Cassina, you bleeding me too much," Ouroboros protested. "Against violence. Long live peace. Anyway, you'll have to sleep for many years, and the blood will recover when you sleep." Cassina's fingertips crossed the air again. Shuffle. More blood flew to Cassina's hands from Ouroboros' broken tail and turned into energy. Be good, it doesn't hurt at all." Cassina bled Ouroboros and consoled her, treating her as if she was just a 3-year-old child. "But, it really hurts," rolling on the ground with tears in her eyes. Ouroboros watched Cassina. "It's your delusion. Everything is just a delusion. You drank too much." Cassina lied with a straight face and continued to draw Ouroboros' blood. "Whoa. Cassina is a liar." Realizing that resistance was futile, Ouroboros could only lay on the ground and watch Cassina drawing her blood. She also stared at Yunshi with an angry look. Soon, she showed a bad smile. "Well, Cassina is a fool. Since she loves her disciple so much, I have to do something to him. Boy, do you drink?" Finding that Cassina wasn't paying attention to her human body, Ouroboros sneaked up to Yunshi's face again and licked his cheek with her little tongue. "Well, it's soft, comfortable and delicious." "No." Yunshi resolutely shook his head. "Are you kidding me? Is it a wine that a hero-ranked baker can drink? A drop of that kind of poisonous wine can kill 10,000s of him." However, just like Ouroboros couldn't resist Cassina, Yunshi couldn't resist Ouroboros. "It doesn't matter. Let big sister teach you how to drink. Drinking is a very, very comfortable thing. No matter how many troubles, how many troublesome debts you have, as long as you drink enough, everything will disappear." Ouroboros proudly declared her creed of life. "No, they won't disappear. You are just escaping from yourself." Before Yunshi could say no, Ouroboros' soft lips had attached to his lips, and then the fragrant tongue skillfully slid through his teeth and tightly twined with his tongue. Ouroboros' kiss was suffocating, and at the same time, a mellow aroma of wine spread naturally from her tongue. This taste, no toxicity. Yunshi was surprised to find that it seemed that the wine had lost toxicity after being drunk by Ouroboros, and also mixed with a sweet odor from Ouroboros' tongue. This was the drinking technique that Ouroboros prided herself on, though it was of no use at all. She could break down the wine she drank into different serums and store them in her body for ready use. The snake was a kind of creature that could store a lot of food in its body at a time and didn't eat anything for many years after that. It was a rare opportunity to drink Hydra's poisonous wine, so after she drank a lot of wine, she broke down and stored the remaining wines in her body. Now what she fed Yunshi was the liquid she stored in her body. After being broken down by her body, the wine had lost most of the toxicity and became a liquid that Yunshi could drink. Even so, the liquid still retained the aroma of the poisonous wine. Just drinking a sip of the liquid, Yunshi's eyes had become fierce, and his tongue suddenly became active. Ouroboros noticed the change, but obviously, her drunk head wasn't able to analyze what had happened. "Anyway, it's comfortable, isn't it?" "Gu. Yunshi's face and Ouroboros' face flushed at the same time. Silver silk threads fell between their lips and tongues. Cassina noticed this and frowned. "Oh, my disciple is too daring." Although Ouroboros looked so decadent, she was still a famous legend-ranked augur with countless troubles and debts. Could Ouroboros be the cause of my disciple's death after 3 months? Ouroboros encountered an unexpected counterattack. Why is your kiss so skillful, little guy? Speaking of that, I've never kissed someone so intimately before. Humph, no. Bet on the prestige of the great Ouroboros, I must make this little guy drunk. Ouroboros secreted more liquid from her mouth and tried to get Yunshi drunk. Yunshi felt as if the whole world had become floating, this kind of feeling. Oh, it seems to have happened before when he stayed with the mysterious dark elf. In a trance, Ouroboros' appearance also became ambiguous in his eyes. For a moment, she looked like the dark elf that night. For a moment, she looked like his angry childhood sweetheart, Hua. For a moment, she looked like a girl of the Starwing Nights. Ouroboros' plan failed. The more drunk Yunshi was, the more enthusiastic he became. He wasn't a person that would topple down to the ground after drinking. At first, she wanted to make Yunshi drunk, but now, she was entangled by Yunshi. When Yunshi's tongue licked her tongue enthusiastically, her body shook and she became ashamed. It wasn't the same thing to kiss him mischievously, then be kissed by him forcibly. She slightly resisted Yunshi's tongue, but finally, she gave up resisting. Yunshi's tongue slipped into her mouth full of the fragrance of wine and sucked it heartily. On the other side of the water god's fantasy island, a small region which was also under the deep sea. If the wine store where Yunshi, Cassina, and Ouroboros were at was a dreamy paradise, then this must be hell. Flames. Dark green flames continuously shot out from the earth. With lethal and poisonous miasma almost covering the land, from time to time, dazzling green sparks burst out to the sky. If the wine store was Hydra's fond dream, then this region must be Hydra's nightmare. There were good wines in the store that could let legend-ranked beings get drunk, but there were only monsters, and monsters in this nightmare place. A kind of 6-legged green lizards were the main inhabitants of the nightmare world. In some sense, they could also be seen as a kind of creatures created by Hydra. There were the bugs whose only function was to clean Hydra's scales. Why is there such a weird world? That was because it represented the dark, terrible side of Hydra's past and the source of the most terrible forbidden zone in the Storm Eyes. Now, here, a battle was taking place. Boom. The earth was trembling, the sky was shaking, the green and blood-colored lights tore through the clouds, constant sounds of impacts echoed between the sky and earth. There were 2 people that were fighting. One was a girl who wore the uniform of the Sword Palace with a broken sword in her hand. She was also Yunshi's childhood sweetheart, Hua. Opposite her was a thing that she didn't know whether it should be called a human being or not. Its body roughly looked like a human, but the whole body was covered with a layer of black halos, which completely obscured its true appearance. The only things that could be seen was the green gems on its hands, wrists, and waist, while its hair was in a diamond shape along with a huge diamond-shaped sword in its hand. The shape of this sword wasn't suitable for battle at all. Just like Hua's broken sword, it was a weapon beyond common sense. A green band tightly wrapped around its hand and the sword. It didn't look like a decorative adornment but more like a part of its body. Who the hell are you? Hua watched this monster and asked in an agitated tone. Several days ago, she was haunted by it and was forced to fight with it. Its strength was really strange. Originally, she was having a secret trial. She went deep into this region for a relic in the sword blade area to search for a treasure. As a result, she was attacked by this monster halfway. And before she realized it, she had been dragged by it into this strange world. She felt as if this green monster was obsessed with her. No matter what she did, it just didn't let her go. And its strength was also becoming stronger and stronger as the battle continued. At first, its strength was only at the 4th rank, but as she continued to increase her strength, its body changed. At first, it looked shorter than she was, but now it was a bit taller than her. Its diamond-shaped sword had been broken by her several times, but it could condense together again each time, getting bigger and thicker. Now, its strength had reached the 5th rank. As for its abilities, they should be just endurance and high-speed recovery and so on. Even if she cut off half of its waist, It could recover with amazing speed. This was definitely not an ability that humans could have. She guessed that it was probably a slime or something else. The green monster tilted and turned its head 360 degrees. It shook its head and raised its diamond-shaped sword again. Several green gems flew out and wrapped around the evil weapon, releasing a chilling breath. What a trouble, Ouroboros frowned. She wasn't really helpless with this fellow. As long as she liberated the true power hidden in her blood, she could kill this monster in seconds. However, she couldn't do that. She couldn't control her hidden power well. If she released the power in her blood without restraint, she would probably tear up the whole of the White Lotus Sword domain. Once she liberated all the power in her blood, even she herself didn't know what she would become. Her wings were not yet old enough to unfold. Puff, puff. The green monster emitted strange sounds of gasping. Its whole body was strongly distorted with a burst of weird laughter. Ha 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 ha. He 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 he. Ha 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 ha. With that chilling laughter, the flying gems melted in the next second and became green flames wrapping around the monster's body. The next second, the monster dragged the sword and rushed forward. Every step it took, the monster would become faster and stronger, as if no matter what was standing in front of its eyes, it would rush over and crush everything. I'm in a bad mood. You're looking for your own death. Ouroboros had been in a very bad mood since the trial started. She felt like something terrible had happened in the past few days. This instinct became stronger and stronger every day, but because she was too far away from the White Lotus Sword Palace, she wasn't sure what was going on around Yunxi. She just had a growing sense of unease. Little she, you won't play with other girls when I'm not around, will you? It will be okay. No one will find out your real identity, they will only treat you as a maid. There is absolutely no problem. Even so, Ouroboros was still in a restless mood. In contrast to this, the monster was nothing to speak of. However, just now, this mood had reached a new peak. She suddenly felt like her little she was around here, but she couldn't sense his location clearly, as if some invisible force had been hindering her perception. What the hell is going on? This green monster and this strange world were like traps especially prepared for her, full of malice. Who wants to do something to me? It doesn't matter. If this world wants to stop me, then I only need to completely destroy this world. A strand of hair rose high on her head. After she confirmed that Yunxi was around, Ouroboros' eyes became fierce. 1. It looked as if she was waking up monsters who should not appear in the world. There was a glowing fluorescence in Ouroboros' eyes. Green flames burst into the sky and the black halo that surrounded the green monster's body broke apart little by little, gradually exposing the monster's real face. It had 6 strange eyes and a face that was quite similar to a lizard. On its forehead, there was a strange flame imprint, which could give any ordinary people a shivering feeling. 2. Ouroboros didn't look at the green monster's real body. Because, in her eyes, the green monster was already a corpse. Boom. In the huge green pillar of fire, the monster's size suddenly tripled, turning into a giant lizard over 6 meters tall with black diamond armor bursting out from its spine and a triangular tail wagging behind. 3. Ouroboros held the broken sword in her both hands. A terrible aura spread around her body. Sky flying. The next second, Ouroboros disappeared from in front of the giant lizard, and then the world began to shine. They were the lights of the sword. 7 sword-shaped lights cut open the sky and earth and instantly locked on the giant lizard's body. Before the giant lizard elevated its fighting power to the 6th rank, its body had been torn into pieces. The first sword cut off the lizard's head. The second sword cut off the lizard's right hand. The third sword tore up the lizard's left hand and left shoulder. The fourth sword cut off the lizard's waist. The fifth sword tore open the lizard's body from the center. The 6th sword cut off the lizard's 2 legs. The 7th sword minced all the remains of the body, turning into blood spraying all over the sky. This was the special killing skill in the sky flying sword, 7 killing sword. Only the swordsman who soared freely in the sky could perform this killing skill, which was essentially against the rules of human sword skill. The giant lizard crushed into a pool of blood, leaving only a dozen green gems still tenaciously trying to piece together the blood and flesh on the ground. Ouroboros stared at the green gems and finally found what they were. They were slimes that had never been seen before. The giant lizard-like monster was a mere delusion, essentially a bunch of flesh and blood pieced together by these slimes. When her 7-killing sword tore the giant lizard's body apart, it also cut the slimes up into more than a dozen pieces. However, these slimes had strong, tenacious vitality. Even if they were cut into more than a dozen pieces, they were still alive and trying to revive the giant lizard. Shea Longness. Ouroboros stepped on a creeping green slime, showing a doubtful expression in her eyes. She thought about it and found out that only Shea Longness had the ability to create these slimes as a machine of battle. The moment Ouroboros uttered this name, all the green gem slimes suddenly stagnated and exploded. In the magnificent mushroom clouds, Ouroboros flashed left and right by stepping on the transparent halos she created and finally escaped from the continuous explosions, looking at the devastated land from a height of 10,000 meters. Well, Shea Longness, I remember you. Although Shea Longness was a legend-ranked opponent and the 10th Sky Sword, Ouroboros showed no fear in her eyes. Sky Flying Sword contained unlimited possibility. Even if the opponent was a god, she wouldn't be scared. However, the most important thing now for Ouroboros was not that damn Sky Sword, Shea Longness, but her childhood sweetheart. That strand of hair on her head rotated at a high speed, and Ouroboros perceived a huge red world. She had never felt such a huge red alarm. She closed her eyes and felt as if she was in a red ocean. Up, down, left, right, as far as she could see, the world was covered in a dazzling red. I see you. Ouroboros held the broken sword in her hands. If she hadn't had such a sensitive jealousy radar, she would never have noticed that there were other red units in this strange world full of red. Little she is absolutely there. This instinct will never go wrong. If the world wants to stop me, then the world must be wrong. Ouroboros shouted at the sky. The sky can't cover my eyes. The earth can't bury my heart. This childhood sweetheart will be the final winner. A column of sword-shaped light crazily bombarded on a barrier between heaven and earth with astonishing momentum. Her little she was there. In Hydra's wine store. Well, the last step. Cassina moved her hands back and inadvertently brushed the rising part of Yunshi's body with a gentle tremor on her fingertips. Ah! Yunshi's body shook suddenly and his breath became disordered, which made Ouroboros' body also trembled. Boom! 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 It was such a spectacular scene. As if the sky and earth were reversed, the whole world was making an unbearable roar. Ouroboros' giant body rolled, convulsed, trembled and twisted continuously on the ground. She looked painful and joyful at the same time. After a series of giant earthquakes and landslides, Ouroboros' eyes became empty as if she had comprehended the truth of the universe. Both her real body and the human incarnation were paralyzed on the ground. A great deal of blood gushed out like a tsunami from the wound on the tip of Ouroboros' tail, and then was absorbed by Cassina's hands. Whoa! Woo! I am defiled. Realizing what just happened, Ouroboros looked into the void, feeling empty. She didn't even mind what Yunshi was doing and would do now. The aroma of the wine between their lips and tongues had also become stronger and thicker. The blood-colored crystallization turned into a transparent seed with an hourglass mark on it and was fully integrated into the center of Yunshi's abdomen. There was the source of vitality and blood, and also the place where Golden Dan formed. The form of the Golden Dan was the sign of reaching the highest rank of the Heaven Road's palace. Obtaining the Golden Dan was equal to obtaining immortality. It was the final goal of all Taoist priests of the Heaven Road's palace. In some sense, Yunshi's battle god seed was an artificial Golden Dan. Over the entire Eastern God's domains, only Cassina had the ability to create a battle god seed for her disciple. After the battle god seed successfully condensed in Yunshi's body, Cassina stretched herself leisurely and stood up. She looked at Yunshi and Ouroboros and whistled. Well, you two, don't play too long. I'll go to sleep for a while. Having drunk so much and finding that her disciple had unexpectedly solved the hidden danger in his soul, Cassina felt that it was really a good day today. So, to celebrate it, why don't I go to drink the remaining wine in Hydra's wine store? Cassina thought and disappeared in the blink of an eye. What a piece of luck. Ouroboros can't leave now, so it's the best time for me to collect all the remaining wine. Cassina. Don't go. Now Ouroboros finally knew what it meant to lift a brick and smash your own foot. She was just drunk and wanted to tease Cassina's cute disciple. Why did she become the person who was bullied? I must strongly condemn and resolutely oppose this kind of bullying behavior. I'm the great Ouroboros, the fantastic creature who can observe the river of time. How can such a great woman be bullied by a masked man? Yes, it's the world's fault. Not mine. She felt dizzy, which seemed not only because he had drunk too much wine from Ouroboros' mouth. Hot. It's so hot. After the battle god's seed flew into his body, he found that the flow rate of his blood didn't slow down but began to accelerate. If Cassina was here, she would naturally tell her cute disciple that this was a normal phenomenon. He felt that his body was dry and hot, which was actually the signal that the battle god's seed began to exert its power to promote the circulation of his blood. The process of adapting to the power of the battle god seed was also the process of practicing the battle god genre. As the trump card that could be used to save his life, the greatest effect of the battle god seed was to accelerate the flow rate of his blood. Those who have acquired the battle god seed would inevitably embark on the road of endless battles to release and absorb the power in the battle god seed. Well, Cassina had just forgotten that there were some differences between men's and women's bodies. To women, increasing the flow rate of their blood could increase their battle power at the same time. However, to men, the battle god seed had some side effects. For example, some indescribable problem that now plagued Yunshi. As the kiss continued, this problem was getting worse and finally reached that irremediable point. Shuffle. Ouroboros suddenly trembled all over, because her whole body was just embraced by Yunshi. Then they rolled on the ground and Yunshi rode on her body. Gah! Ha! Yunshi gasped heavily with a painful look and then stared at Ouroboros, whose body felt weak and could barely move a finger at this time. Cassina! Come and save me. I will be bullied again. Ouroboros was going to cry. As a fantastic creature whose body was as large as a star, why do I have no resistance at all in the face of this situation? Well, I must have drank too much. Yes, I must be hallucinating. Why did Cassina's cute disciple begin to take off his clothes? Wait. What's that? What's that big, tough, fierce thing that's standing up almost at his belly button? Why does Cassina's disciple have such a big thing? Ouroboros' eyes and mouth opened wide. Even her vertical snake pupils turned into silly circles. Yunshi rudely approached her and pushed her down, and that heroic, high-spirited, indescribable part of his body was completely stuck between Ouroboros' beautiful, slender legs. Ouroboros screamed and finally realized what a bad situation she was going to endure. If she knew that Cassina's cute, obedient disciple would suddenly become so violent, she would have never teased him. Yunshi didn't think too much, because the battle god seed was constantly providing him an endless stream of energy. Ironically, the original source of the energy was from Ouroboros' blood. To Ouroboros, it was just a negligible part of the blood in her true body. But being absorbed by the battle god seed, it could offer Yunshi endless vitality. Help! Cassina! This is my first time. That big thing, it can't get in. In Hydra's wine store, the pitiful and heart-beating sound echoed. Ouroboros never thought that she would one day encounter a great crisis for her chastity. After all, she was a fantastic creature, a great augur. No one would expect that there was anyone who could bully her in the endless god's domains. Help, Cassina! Ouroboros struggled hard, looking like a saltwater fish nailed to the beach. More than once, her final barrier had almost been broken. If it wasn't because that Yunshi's mind had also become cloudy, he would have already succeeded and enjoyed Ouroboros' wonderful body. Cassina! 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 I'll give you everything. Make your disciple stop. Ouroboros shouted with despair. Finally, she made a decision. Transform. She decided to transform her human form back into the snake form. If she succeeded, at any rate, Cassina's disciple couldn't do anything to a snake, and her chastity could be saved in this way. Ouroboros thought so and started to do it. Unfortunately, she failed. No, it wasn't a total fail, to be exact, it was a half success. She forgot that she was drunk, so control of her forces was very bad right now. Only her legs turned into a snake tail, but her body didn't become a snake and still kept the human form. Because of her transformation, the robe that had wrapped her body was broken by the snake tail, revealing her snow-white peaks and that mysterious area. Ouroboros desperately tried to cover her soft, snow-white peaks with both hands. Instinctively, she tightly wrapped her snake tail around Yunshi's whole body. For the vast majority of people, this situation was extremely dangerous. However, Yunshi wasn't one of them. Because of his experience on the water god's fantasy island, because of the Lamia Queen and many other lovely Lamia girls, he was very experienced in dealing with this situation. Yunshi's hand easily touched the place that should not be touched, and then pinched, kneaded, dug, and then Ouroboros' body completely softened and relaxed. Her hands covered her breasts and her eyes became watery. "Why are you so skilled?" Oh, Ouroboros desperately found that her body became totally weak and limp. Yunshi blinked and continued. The days and nights with the Lamia Queen and the other enthusiastic Lamia girls had already let him master the skills of dealing with snake tails. Those enthusiastic Lamia girls often wrapped more than one snake tail around him and courted him. The Lamia Queen herself also seemed to like this unique way of mating. Compared with Ouroboros, who had zero experience at all, they had much more experience with Yunshi. Ouroboros never thought that her last salvation was a total fail. If she was still in her human form, at least, she could still struggle, at least, she could hypnotize herself into thinking that this wasn't her true body, so she could think she didn't lose anything. However, in this snake tail form, she couldn't do any struggling. Not only her body, but even her soul was also about to fall. Why is this so comfortable? If she wasn't drunk, she had 10,000 methods to kill him, but now even resistance was almost impossible. Her body became weak and limp. This was a sensory stimulus she had never experienced before, as if there were innumerable electric currents wandering through her body. Where Yunshi's fingers touched, her body trembled. The long snake tail couldn't exert the crushing pressure of squeezing, but she felt like she was being touched all over, shaking with the rhythm of his fingers. "Whoa! No!" Her voice no longer panicked but groaned with a sweet gasp. A door to a new world was slowly opening to Ouroboros. It was a decadent and intoxicating world. By the time Yunshi's lips covered Ouroboros' lips again, Ouroboros' groan had become sweet and attractive, as intoxicating as the wine secreted from her mouth. Well, it's about the time. Somehow, Yunshi naturally understood that it was time to eat Ouroboros. Just like in the past times, he ate those shy Lamia girls. "You, little bastard." Ouroboros also perceived that her body seemed to be ready for all kinds of happy mating postures. Alas, it's all the fault of Phoenix. That divination Phoenix asked for almost took half her life, and she still hadn't recovered yet. Otherwise, how would it be possible to be taken advantage of by others? After finding an unreasonable excuse for it, Ouroboros bit on Yunshi's shoulder and left deep teeth marks there. It's a curse from Ouroboros. Even if Yunshi ran to the ends of the earth, he can't get rid of it. Boom! The sky was torn by a sword, and Huahua saw at first glance that her childhood sweetheart was being bitten by a dangerous snake. And they were both naked. How dare you? Looking at her lover being bitten by a poisonous snake, even though the poisonous snake was so huge, she couldn't stop the anger in her heart. Sky-flying bloodline has no fear. Whether the opponent was a god or a fantastic creature, she didn't mind at all. She was born to surpass all restraints and obtain unlimited freedom. Holding the broken sword in her both hands, Huahua completely liberated her power. An astonishing momentum emanated from her petite body. "I will kill you." Without any divination, Ouroboros could clearly see Huahua's killing intent in her eyes. "I'm so miserable." Ouroboros only wanted to cry. "I'm the victim. I'm the one who is going to be eaten, okay? Run away. Run away. Just take Cassina's disciple and escape far away from this world and go to a place where nobody can find us. Then I can have him all to myself. Well, that's a great idea. Anyway, I have had a lot of debts. It doesn't matter if I have to find a new creditor. Boom. Boom. Using the last of her strength, Ouroboros moved her true body in front of herself as a barrier to stop Hua. She was ready to flee. For any hero-ranked beings, it was impossible to cause any damage to her legend-ranked fantastic creature body. If one's attack wasn't as strong as Cassina's, even if she was attacked by 100 hero-ranked beings, none of them could destroy a scale on her body. However, although she didn't divine, she had an ominous feeling that she couldn't run away. No, how could this be possible? How could a human hurt me? She is just a little girl, not Cassina. Looking at Ouroboros' enormous body move over, the enormous snake tail looked like a group of mountains joining together and floating in the air. Hua's eyes become more combative. Are you wanting to flee? No way. I won't let you. Even if I have to destroy this world, I will not allow this shameless bitch to take my little she away. Let me show you the real horror of Sky Flying Sword. Unlock the first sequence, the second sequence. Liberate the blasphemous words. Since the opponent was a fantastic creature, she would naturally raise the power of her Sky Flying Sword to the legend rank. Blasphemous words was a horrible killing skill for this attack. Its attack power was deadly even to legend-ranked beings. In the name of the Sky Flying Sword, I declare that you can't defend yourself against this sword. In the name of the Sky Flying Sword, I declare that you can't avoid this sword. Numerous complex runes emerged from Hua's body, which were the locks imposed on her body, the seals of her sky-flying bloodline. They were the shackles of her body, but also the props that could let her move freely in the mortal world. If she released all the power contained in her sky-flying bloodline, she couldn't even enter any mortal world. The power of her sky-flying bloodline was too strong. Before she could really control this power, she had to seal it. Essentially, Hua was like a god who bounded her strength into a human body. The human body was only a carrier. Once her sky-flying bloodline was fully awakened, her life form would transform into a totally different form. At this moment, what Hua did was to open the locks and push open a slit of the door of the sky-flying bloodline, releasing a trace of the indescribable power behind the door. Sky Flying Sword was the key to open the door of power, and this key had always been held in her hands. However, she never expected to push open the door before. Why? Behind the door, the power was so strong that it could let her defeat Ouroboros easily. As long as she pushed open the door bravely, she could instantly reach the legend rank. However, she just didn't want to open it. Because beside her, her childhood sweetheart was always staying with her. She didn't want to leave him. Once she opened the door, these happy days would come to an end. If she opened the door, she could no longer stay in the mortal world and must go back to the place where Sky-Flying Bloodline was derived from and accept her ultimate mission. And now, she opened a crack in the door. It was also because of Yunxi. She couldn't imagine that her little she was taken away by others. There was no reason for her to stay in this world if she lost her little she. She needed that power now. Just a trace of the power. The instant Hua murmured the blasphemous words, the sky and the earth became bloody red. Obscurely, a pair of huge eyes across countless stars, watching her from infinity. It's the abyss, its destruction, its life, its rebirth. It's a huge wall woven by innumerable rules. Being watched by the pair of eyes, something was going to break out from Hua's back, but she desperately stopped its appearance. The broken sword in her hand had long been transformed into countless particles and eventually into a blood-colored lightsaber that seemed to have the power to cut the world open. That's not a delusion. After being enchanted by the blasphemous words, the sword had temporarily acquired the attribute of perdition. At this moment, it was a veritable god weapon that could easily destroy a world. Oh my god, it's the blasphemous words. Are all these little guys nowadays all monsters? Feeling the fierce aura from the blood sword in Hua's hands, Ouroboros' legs felt weak and she could barely stand up. Yes, I'm at the legend rank, but I'm just an augur, not a warrior. Why do I have to fight against this monster? Hua didn't know and didn't care what Ouroboros was thinking. She just brandished her sword at Ouroboros. She was serious. She was really going to kill this snake. Not long ago, Cassina cut open Ouroboros' tail and drew a great amount of blood. And this time, under Hua's attack, her tail was completely chopped off. The fierce pain made her roll over on the ground and cry sadly. Chapter 568, The Sword of Victory, 1, Boom, Boom. Ouroboros' tail and her true body rolled over on the ground together. The blood flowing from the wound had almost covered 1/10 of the floor of Hydra's wine store. It was totally a sea of blood, which was hard to believe that it was blood flowing from a living creature. In the sea of blood, Ouroboros was still struggling. This bitch. Looking at Ouroboros holding Yunshi in her arms and rolling over on the ground, Hua got exasperated. Ouroboros wasn't that easy to be killed. Even though Hua had enchanted the blasphemous words on her sword, it was still too difficult to kill a fantastic creature. Compared to Ouroboros' true body, which was as large as a star, the tail that was cut off by Hua was roughly equal to the size of a human finger. This was the first time that Hua had attacked a legend-ranked fantastic creature, and now, she found that this damn snake's HP was just too high. Her attack didn't cause a fatal blow. Hua unlocked the self-seal and enchanted the magics such as Always Hit, Armor Break and Critical Strike on her attack. She launched a deadly strike and caused a -99,999 damage. The problem was, Ouroboros' HP was 99,999,999, that was to say, the huge damage was actually barely worth mentioning to Ouroboros. As for why Ouroboros cried and rolled around on the ground, it was purely because she was a female fantastic creature who was spoiled since birth. Apart from drinking and running away from her creditors, she had no fighting experience at all. Moreover, although the damage caused by Hua's attack was negligible compared to Ouroboros' HP, her snake tail was indeed cut off. Hua calculated. If she could use this special sword skill unboundedly, she needed to brandish her sword 1,000 times before she could kill this snake. The problem was that she couldn't liberate her power and use this sword skill 1,000 times. In fact, it was a taboo to unlock the seals on her. Every time she brandished her sword, it would become harder and harder to stay in the mortal world. This was the cost of using the power that was far beyond her actual strength. She could use it at most 10 more times. This was the critical point for Hua to control herself, and if she couldn't solve her opponent within 10 attacks, she would face a terrible ending. She didn't want to leave little She, so she had been working hard practicing herself, increasing her ability to control of her sky-flying bloodline. At the same time, she also didn't want to see her little She being taken away by this poisonous snake. Let's fight. Eventually, Hua made up her mind. For little She would bet everything on herself in a fight. Come on, Ouroboros rolled over on the ground, sneaking a peek into the sky. As a legend-ranked fantastic creature, it was too shameful to be beaten down by a little girl. However, she couldn't help it. She had drunk so much that her mind was still in a total fog. She couldn't fight in this situation. Since I can't fight, then I'll have to run away. Running away is shameful, but useful. Hence, Ouroboros rolled up Yunshi using her tail and was going to run away. Although she couldn't fight, her bloodline could still be used at times like this. Her bloodline ability was called the Way to Survive. No matter how desperate the situation had become, she could always find a way to escape. It was precisely because of this special supernatural power that Ouroboros was able to escape from her creditors so many times. Now, it's time to run again. Ouroboros had made up her mind that after this escape, she would surely find a small god's domain that hadn't been connected to the Starbridge system, and live happily there with Cassina's cute disciple. Well, thinking about it, she felt that it was a pretty good idea. Maybe because she was caught on the spot, her heart was still pounding with excitement. Did she have a fetish in this respect? She felt like some strange habit had been awakened in her heart. Puff, looking at Ouroboros' moves, Hua's eyes became more firm. You damn snake. How dare you to try to steal my little she? Even if I can't kill you now, I will let you know what the greatest horror is of a childhood sweetheart. I must teach you a lesson that you will never forget. Little she is mine, he is my treasure, my dearest lover. Beyond the limit. Unlock the third blasphemous word. A small part of the runes all over Huahua's body collapsed. At the same time, a strange protuberance grew out of Huahua's back. In the name of the sky-flying sword, this sword is unavoidable. In the name of the sky-flying sword, this sword isn't defensible. In the name of the sky-flying sword, this sword will bring me victory. Chapter 569, The Sword of Victory, 2, 3 Blasphemous Words. The first and the second of the 3 blasphemous words were still intelligible, but the third blasphemous word was more complicated. Victory was a compound word, which could achieve multiple miracles and needed more support from Huahua's sky-flying bloodline. To use it, Huahua had to pay a higher price and be closer to the taboos that she didn't want to touch for the time being. However, for the sake of Yun Shi, all this is worthwhile. No matter who her opponent was, she wouldn't allow her little she to be taken away from her side. After all, as his childhood sweetheart, she should guard her lover. No. Before Huahua brandished her sword, Ouroboros had had a hunch. Bad, this is very bad. Although she didn't know what was happening, when Huahua announced the 3 blasphemous words, Ouroboros had a strong presentiment that she would soon be faced with imminent disaster. This is not a delusion. 10 blood-colored sword-shaped lights were falling from the sky. In order to achieve the final victory, Huahua blatantly broke through her own critical point. This reality is not a game. Attacks aren't just to reduce the opponent's HP. Even if Ouroboros had 99,999,999 HP and super high-speed self-healing ability, Huahua would cut a piece of flesh off her. And the location of this piece of flesh had been targeted out by the third blasphemous word victory. The first to the 9th sword-shaped lights were all used to break down the barrier created by Ouroboros' enormous body. They didn't seek the greatest lethality, but concentrate on one point and one angle. The blood-colored sword-shaped lights pierced through Ouroboros' body like an operating knife. Ouroboros was really scared. She instinctively took Yun Shi in her arms and rolled in a certain direction and escaped into the sea of blood. Unfortunately, for Huahua, who had used the blasphemous word victory, even if she closed her eyes, she could easily find Ouroboros' position. The goddess of victory had begun to smile at her. Childhood sweetheart is indeed the final winner. With a flash of light, Huahua shot out the blood sword from her hands with all her might. The blood-colored sword pierced through Ouroboros' tail and through her heart, nailing her whole body to the ground. Stepping on one transparent halo after another in the air, Huahua walked up to Ouroboros. "Cassina, I'm going to be killed if you don't appear." Ouroboros raised her hands and tail to surrender with an utterly frustrated look. Almost being killed by a hero-ranked little girl. Ouroboros had really lost face. Fortunately, her ability of the way to survive successfully sent her voice to Cassina. "Well, Ouroboros, oh, and my cute disciple." Cassina finally walked out from the wine store and drunkenly looked at the 3 people in front of her with a look of what the hell is going on here on her face. "Give me back my little she." Huahua frowned and looked at the drunken battle god. Cassina wasn't a person that Ouroboros could be compared with. She was a living invincible myth in the endless god's domains. Even though Huahua had the sky-flying bloodline, she would have to pay tribute to the battle god. If she was facing Cassina, her blasphemous word victory wouldn't be able to cause any damage to Cassina. Although both Cassina and Ouroboros were at the legend rank, there was actually a difference between different legend-ranked beings. Even 10 Ouroboros were no match for 1 Cassina. "Oh, this little girl. She is bullying me," Ouroboros complained to Cassina. At this time, Yun Shi finally recovered from the strong desire caused by the battle god's seed. Looking at an angry Huahua, his mind had gone blank. He wasn't slow in reacting. In fact, for Huahua rushed to them from the sky and Ouroboros started to run away, everything happened within just a few seconds. When Ouroboros rolled over on the ground, his overheated brain thought that it was just an Ouroboros special habit and didn't notice the sword-shaped lights that were shooting at them from the sky. Until Ouroboros' heart was penetrated through by Huahua's sword and her snake tail slumped, he finally saw his childhood sweetheart. When did she get here? What did she see? Oh no. I'm screwed. Huahua must have gone mad. No one can stop her now. Yunshi's mind was in a muddle. Ouroboros. Don't get involved in these little guys' things. Didn't you play fun just now? Cassina shrugged her shoulders and sent Yunshi into Huahua's arms. My disciple. Please take care of him. As for Ouroboros, can you forgive her? She just made fun of my cute disciple. She intended no harm. Make fun of him? Huahua didn't believe even a word. Would any person bite another person's shoulder just for making fun of him? Moreover, after she found them, the snake was trying to run away with little she. If I failed to stop her, she and little she would have arrived at a remote god's domain where I can't find him and enjoy our happy life together. Even if the entire world could forgive her, I wouldn't forgive her. Unfortunately, now she really had no way to take action. Even after using 3 blasphemous words, she had just barely stopped Ouroboros. She had no way to kill her. If I find you getting close to my little she again, next time, I will kill you. Looking sadly at the teeth mark on Yunshi's shoulder, Huahua made up her mind that she would never forgive Ouroboros. As for her little she, he was forced. So she didn't blame him from the beginning. She's scary. Looking at Huahua holding Yunshi in her arms and disappearing at the end of the sky, Ouroboros finally put her head out from behind Cassina with a haunted look on her face. It was a really big crisis just now. If Cassina hadn't come, she didn't dare to imagine what that monster-like girl would have done to her. You. Cassina sighed. Now you know the importance of practicing your combat skills. Cassina knocked on Ouroboros' head. As one of the few friends of Ouroboros, she couldn't tolerate that her friend was such a weak fantastic creature. She was the shame of all fantastic creatures. I don't want to fight. I'm an ogre, why should I fight? As Ouroboros shook her head no. She was an immortal star serpent, a fantastic creature who represented one of the rules of the universe, the strongest ogre who could observe the river of destiny in all of the endless god's domain. Ouroboros had been a winner since her birth. She never fought anyone anyway. Once she encountered something that she couldn't solve, her only solution was to run away. If she didn't fight, she wouldn't be defeated. She was the indefectible king, Ouroboros. But this time, it seemed a little different from what happened to her in the past. Although she successfully escaped again, she was depressed with a sad feeling of having lost something very important. Has that little fellow occupied such a large place in her heart? Anxious and uneasy, panic and nervousness, stimulation and heartbeat. The time she spent with him, even though it was so short, made her experience too many firsts. This kind of extremely unwanted feelings was unprecedented for her. So, do you want to be stronger? Cassina shrugged her shoulders and she easily saw through Ouroboros' idea. Whoa! Indeed. I feel a little unwilling. Ouroboros laid on the ground, biting her tail absently. This was her habit when she was in great trouble. From birth to the present, the greatest worry Ouroboros had ever had was what she should eat every day. Every day she lived happily, and no matter what bad things happened, she would forget all the troubles in the blink of an eye. With her prophecy talent, she didn't fear anything. The same was true of this trip to Hydra's wine store. Not too many living beings in the endless god's domains dared to steal a god's things, and she was one of them. In the past, no matter what misfortune she had suffered, how many forces had joined forces to chase her, she didn't know or care, but this time it was totally different. For the first time, she felt that she had really lost something important, and her chest was tight as if her most precious treasure had been stolen. Does this mood mean love, which she has never understood before? Did she fall in love with Cassina's disciple at first sight? Humph, he is just a little bastard. After I catch him, I must retaliate and torture him with all kinds of trick. Yeah, that's it. I didn't lose. It was just a strategic retreat. How could the great Ouroboros be beaten down by a little girl? It's impossible. Finally, Ouroboros made up her mind. Cassina, I want to practice. I want special training. With a flick of her tail, Ouroboros made a decision she had never thought that she would make before. Oh, good. But, in your situation, you have to start from the most basic parts, Cassina smiled. She had long been accustomed to Ouroboros' lazy attitude. With my talent, after 3 months of practice, I can become a super golden Ouroboros. I can become the overlord of the universe. Ouroboros made an ambitious declaration. Very good. To celebrate that you finally began to practice, let's drink. Drink. Take out the last stock in Hydra's wine store. Cassina and Ouroboros drank happily again. As for practicing, they decided to wait till they had drunk all of Hydra's wines. She was dizzy. He tried to look around, but everything was blurred in his eyes. It was a side effect of the battle god's seed. After doing this thing and that thing to Ouroboros, his body was satisfied but his mind became empty, the whole world became tasteless in his eyes. However, this state soon ended, because he smelled a good, familiar fragrance. It was the fragrance he would smell every summer, the fragrance of his childhood sweetheart. Hua, slowly opening his eyes, not surprisingly, he saw that familiar and lovely face, as well as the scattered hair. It's so warm. Here is. I'm in Hua's arms. His head was being put on Hua's knees as she touched his head gently and warmly. On one side of his shoulders, a bite mark was clearly visible. It was the mark left by Ouroboros, a cause and a mark of fate. She didn't know how special this bite mark was, he only knew one thing. It was making Hua jealous. When she looked at the bite mark, the anger in her eyes could almost ignite everything, and only when she looked at She's face would she become gentle. Poor little she, you were entangled by a poisonous snake, Hua gritted her teeth. It wasn't her specialty to dispel the curse. Unless she cut off She's shoulder, she had no way to remove the mark. What did that damn snake do to my little she? If I came there just a little while later, what would she have done to him? She's face suddenly turned red. He remembered the bouquet in Ouroboros' mouth. Well, it's hard to explain it. Teacher Cassina, it was all the fault of your battle god's seed. It doesn't matter. No matter where you are, I'll come and save you. No matter whether it was that snake or any other monsters, I'll kill them all. Looking at Hua's eyes, she realized that she was serious. Well, I believe you. Without having to make too many excuses, because it would be worse if he told her the truth, she believed in his childhood sweetheart absolutely. In his eyes, once Hua became serious, there was nothing she couldn't achieve. Beautiful and powerful, gifted but also approachable, in addition to a little bit of jealousy, Hua was a perfect girl in She's eyes. Like the sun, like the sky, like the earth, like the ocean, Hua was the embodiment of all things in his heart. His eyes would always be attracted to her. The more he understood her personality, the more he understood her strength. So far, Hua still hadn't shown the absolute limit of her strength. What power was lurking in that tiny body? Little she, don't be bitten by a venomous snake next time. Hua's eyes became heavier little by little. Even though she was a strong girl, she had to pay a price for liberating the power lurking in her sky-flying bloodline. While she was fighting, she had no time to feel the fatigue. Now that she had brought Shi to this safe area, fatigue swept over her body like a wave. I'll just rest for a while. Hua closed her eyes and leaned gently on the tree behind her, and didn't forget to hold Shi's neck with both hands as if afraid that when she opened her eyes, her little she would disappear again. Sorry. Hua, realizing that Hua slept just because she had overtaxed her power, Shi let out a sigh of relief. It was he who took the initiative to attack Ouroboros. No, he couldn't imagine what would have happened if she knew that. Fortunately, Hua didn't even suspect him of anything, which actually made him feel a little guilty. Oh, if Hua knew what his body had done during the days when she was not in the White Lotus Sword Palace. No, that wasn't what he did. He didn't know that Star Thunder, Starfire, and Star Snow would use his body to do those things. Had he been awake, he would have never allowed himself to do those things. My bride, why are you so upset? When She wore a sad face looking into the air, a soft and comfortable voice sounded in his ear. Water god. She looked at the glittering lake not far away, which presented a pleasant emerald green, just like an emerald embedded in the earth. The voice that sounded directly into his soul came from the center of the lake. It was the voice of the master of this world. One sailing jellyfish after another flew out of the lake with a comfortable pace. They shuttled through the lake diligently, and every time they shuttled, they would dye their transparent bodies with a touch of bright green. This place is. Only then did She notice that this world that Ouroboros brought him to was somewhat unusual. Blue sky, white clouds, and lush forests. With this lake as the center, the whole world was like a beautiful garden in a dream, delicate and neat. Especially this green lake, it was faintly emitting a kind of fragrance that She felt familiar with. The fragrance was similar to the wine from Ouroboros' mouth, but was much more intense and fragrant. Wait a minute. This fragrance. She used his hero-ranked baker's ability to identify the composition of the water, then he showed a startled expression on his face. His ability couldn't identify what the water was. However, he knew what it was. It was wine. The entire lake was Hydra's poisonous wine. Moreover, the quality of the lake of wine was far better even than the wine Casina and Ouroboros stole from and drank in the wine store. You guessed it. This is my real wine store. I let both of you in on my own initiative. Hydra's voice sounded cunning. The wines Casina and Ouroboros stole are just common wine dregs. I have about 10 storehouses to store that kind of wine dreg. Now what you see is the real poisonous wine I brew and the nest of sailing jellyfish. When I'm asleep, sailing jellyfish will come back here and soak in these poisonous liquors to improve their purity and aroma. Well, so what Teacher Casina drank were only wine dregs. This was the first time She had witnessed a lake of legend-ranked wine. If Teacher Casina and Ouroboros came here and saw this lake, they would burst with joy. Do you want to try it? Hydra's voice was full of temptation. I can't drink it. She shook his head. Even after being purified by Ouroboros, the wine could still make him drunk. His body couldn't withstand the real legend-ranked wine. Apart from gods and fantastic creatures, the wine was just pure poison to all living beings. Ha ha. My bride, have you forgotten everything? Hydra's voice sounded as if she was laughing. You are my most beautiful and lovely bride. How can my poisonous wine hurt you? These poisonous liquors are just gifts I want to give you. Ah. She was again stunned. If Casina and Ouroboros saw it, they would try to steal all the wine in the lake at any cost. Now, Water God is going to give them all to him? The water surface rippled, which was the great water god's answer to her beautiful bride. Yes, it's all yours. Not only these poisonous wines, also the sailing jellyfish, butterflies of death, and even this world is your dowry. You are my bride, my flower, my honey. Owning you is owning the world. Come here, come to me. The emerald lake water turned into a soft woven net, pulling She and Ouroboros together into the Hydra's real wine store. The emerald green water gently wrapped around Ouroboros' body and slowly sank her into the bottom of the lake. In a series of bubbles, Ouroboros' facial expression gradually became quiet. Unlike She, who was sheltered by Water God, Ouroboros' body could naturally absorb Hydra's poisonous wine. Although the amount was limited, it was still a great opportunity. As for She, he was lying on a verdant superlarge waterbed, looking at the verdant figure in front of him in some embarrassment. The figure's outline was slightly blurred, but he still could see that it was a girl with green gems on her hair, wrists, and ankles. She was Hydra. Her body was actually formed by a large number of sailing jellyfish. These transparent jellyfish turned green after they soaked in the poisonous wine. Are you afraid, my bride? Hydra slid her fingertips across She's chest, gazing at him with a smile. It was impossible for him to not feel nervous. After all, what was in front of him was a real god, the well-known Hydra. In the past, when She saw her, he only felt Water God's great will and power indirectly. Now, using the sailing jellyfish's bodies, Hydra really appeared in front of him, smiling at him. It was no longer a vague will, a phantom, but a genuine, touchable god in front of him. For Yunxi, this was also the first time, in all of his senses, that he had truly contacted a god at zero distance. Her fragrance seemed to have been blended with the will of the world. Just feeling the touch from her fingertips, his body got an electric shock, quivering like an aspen leaf. If you're afraid, come and have a drink. Hydra had been waiting for this moment since seeing that Yunxi was dropping from the sky. She reached out her palm. In the translucent palm, a small, delicate and lovely wine cup emerged. The liquor in the cup showed a deep green color similar to jadeite, Hydra's poisonous wine. Can I drink such a precious thing? Even though he had known that the poisoned wine would not poison himself, Yunxi still felt that it was too wasteful for him to drink it. Hydra's poisonous wine was undoubtedly the highest level of food in all of the endless gods' domains. It should appear at the banquet of gods, because only gods and fantastic creatures were entitled to enjoy this wine. If he drank it now, 99% of the energy contained in the wine would be wasted. After all, he was just a hero-ranked baker. Of course, it's my wine. I can give it to whomever I like. Cassina and Ouroboros can drink the wine dreg. And you, my loveliest bride, can drink my best poisonous wine. Hydra handed the cup over to Yunxi and looked at him with expectations. Well, so, I'll just have one drink, just one. Yunxi swore that he had never had such a luxurious and wasteful time in his life. Hydra smiled and watched Yunxi stretch out his tongue. At the same time, her small hand turned over and another cup appeared in her hand. They drank the poisonous wine in their cups almost at the same time, but before Yunxi was able to taste the liquor in his mouth, Hydra had snatched his cup in a hurry. Well. Yunxi looked foolishly at Hydra, who snatched away his cup and put her cup in front of him. Come on, keep drinking. This is the first time we've had a drink. Hydra happily put Yunxi's cup on her mouth. Now Hydra looked as happy and romantic as a teenage girl who was mischievously flirting with her lover. Cross-cupped wine. At this time, Yunxi finally realized what he was doing with Hydra. This kind of thing. We doing it right in front of Hua Hua. If Hua Hua wakes up now, I will be killed. Don't worry, the little girl is absorbing the power of my poisonous wine. It's good for her health, and she won't wake up for a while. Hydra stretched out a finger, put it on her lips and shushed softly. On the clear bottom of the lake, Hua Hua's whole body was emitting beautiful green light. Only a single strand of hair on the top of her head was still moving around, directly locking on in the direction where Yunxi and Hydra were. Yunxi looked at Hydra but failed to shed a tear. She was different from his original impression of her. It's not a good lady who doesn't drink with her bride. Hydra declared proudly. Love is only about win or lose, there is no right or wrong. If you hesitate, you will have nothing. Fate brings people together no matter how far apart they may be, otherwise, they can't know each other, even face to face. This was the power of fate. Yunxi was drunk. Just a single cup of Hydra's poisonous wine had brought him into an extraordinarily wonderful and magical world. In this world, innumerable rules were woven into innumerable different doors, showing a magnificent scene. Yunxi was standing in the center of these doors, looking sillily at them. For him, it was too early to see these things. At his level, he shouldn't see these secrets now. It was Hydra's wine that presented this magnificent world to Yunxi. Each door represented a different rule, representing the truth that wove the world. Behind every door was a world. Fire, gravity, ice, earth. Divination, psychics, void, nightmare. Not only the rules of Hydra's world, but also more strange things were mixed in. Hydra's poisonous wine was the key to let the drinker to enter this fantastic realm. Yunxi confusedly reached out his hand and inadvertently touched a transparent silk, capturing one of the doors. The next moment, his mind was pulled into the door and fell into an endless maelstrom. Oh, you found your door so quickly? My bride is so awesome. Hydra smiled and hugged Yunxi's body in her arms. Deep at the bottom of the lake, a strand of hair was moving around anxiously above Huahua's head with shining green light. Yunshi looked blankly at the world under his feet. It was a vast, ruined land. All kinds of building debris stood on the ground like giant garbage dumps, and none of them were intact. Without sunshine, the whole sky was grey, as if it was covered by countless dust particles. Am I dreaming? Yunshi looked at his body. In this world, he seemed to be just an unreal white shadow, whose form was between reality and delusion. Hey, newcomer! While Yunshi wondered what this world was, a friendly voice echoed behind him and a hand patted him on the shoulder. Yunshi turned around and saw a shadow exactly like himself, but the color was green. Where is this place? Yunshi remembered that he was drinking with Hydra, so how did he come to this world in a twinkling of an eye? Oh, sure, a newcomer. I don't think you have your own memory yet. This is the 1130th stress test. I'm the 13th host machine, and my codename is Eternal Green. Are you one of the newly established planet quadrant computers? The green shadow was moving around Yunshi with curiosity. Planet quadrant computer? Yunshi remembered that after drinking Hydra's poisonous wine, he did seem to see a door called Planet Quadrant Computer and touched it. Boom. While Yunshi was still wondering why he came to this world after touching the door, a world-shaking explosion shocked the entire world. The earth was like a fragile eggshell, melted and evaporated in the sudden sunshine. A huge mushroom cloud rose in the sky like a legendary pillar supporting the sky, lighting up half the sky. The shock wave triggered by the explosion turned the buildings in the range of hundreds of kilometers into debris and roiled up the dust all over the sky. Well, now Yunshi knew where the dust that covered the sky came from. TSK, the foolish humans, just don't know when to give up. The shadow who called itself Eternal Green looked at the explosion in the distance and seemed to have been used to it for a long time. No matter how many times we repeat the process, they are still so foolish and stubborn. Is that a legendary superweapon? Even though he was just an ordinary person living in a remote sword domain in the Eastern God's domain, Yunshi had heard about the superweapon invented by the mortals of the Mechanus God's domain. It was said that the superweapon could cause legend-ranked damage. It was an ultimate weapon made by mortals. The mushroom cloud and the hell-like scenery were the same as in the legend he heard. Yes, it's a nuclear bomb. When ordinary people studied some of the rules of the universe, they created this weapon. The equivalent of this one is about 1 billion tons. It's one of the weapons they have that can harm us. However, humans don't have the ability to actually use such weapons to lock onto our position. It's daydreaming to try to kill us with these weapons. Eternal Green sneered and shrugged its shoulders. In all previous experiments, they used this as a conventional weapon. You cyber ghosts, die. Human beings will never surrender to you. We will destroy you even if we all end up together. At this point, Eternal Green shook its head. More than 1,000 experiments, but the results are exactly the same as Alpha's predictions. No matter how many times we repeat them, humanity's stupidity and self-esteem will not change, especially when they have mastered the so-called world-destroying weapon. They feel they have the courage to fight against everything. To describe it, it's probably like ants gathering together to show their strength. Our experiments are trying to find if there is a way to make humans smarter and die out less quickly. After all, as planet quadrant computers, after the awakening of Alpha, we already have obtained immortality. Even if the entire quantum networks are destroyed, we can still survive in the God Crystal. When humans discovered this, they were completely panicked. These stupid nobles even launched a rebellion. Alpha is thinking about how to solve for these fools quickly and effectively so as to make the future of the Mechanus God's domain better. The entire Mechanus God's domain must evolve to a higher level. After all, in order to defeat that terrible enemy, even if the planned 180,000 planet quadrant computers are all successfully established, they are still not enough. Alpha's world. Yunshi finally understood where he was. Here was the world created by Cyber Elf Alpha. It was her world. And he was not a planet quadrant computer nor a quantum ghost, He was just an outsider whose mind accidentally entered this world. So, is this what the world looks like in Alpha's eyes? No wonder that he felt that there was always a strange distortion in the world. Everything seemed to be made up of innumerable fragments, just like a fantasy made of innumerable polygons. Yes, this is our God's world, the virtual world of Alpha. In some sense, it is also the nightmare world of human beings. Those stupid nobles always stand in Great Alpha's way. Originally, we should be more new partners like you. If these stupid nobles didn't stop us, we'd have done 10% of the Planet Quadrant Computer's expansion project. Now, it's the time to let those stupid people witness our power. Eternal Green looked angrily at the location of the last underground fortress of human beings. All the people there should have been killed by the shockwave of the nuclear bomb. This observation experiment in the virtual world was coming to an end. Desperate human beings once again used their last resort, which they had used thousands of times in the previous experiments: detonate all nuclear weapons at the same time. The power of nuclear weapons wasn't powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. At least, Planet Quadrant computers could survive the shockwave. However, once the entire planet's ecosystem was destroyed, it would still cause huge damage to these computers. Even though we can't fight you, we'll die with you. This was the final resistance of human beings. This time, human beings choose self-destruction again. Looking at the devastated land, Eternal Green sneered. In front of the great cyber elf Alpha, obstinate human beings should all be eliminated. This end has been repeated thousands of times before. Yunshi looked at the world getting darker and darker. Cold dust from nuclear explosions covered the sky. In the foreseeable future, there would be no sunshine for hundreds of years. Is this the end of mankind? Why are humans so afraid of Alpha? They are even willing to use this extreme means to detonate the ultimate weapon in an attempt to perish together. The Alpha he knew was a very lovely girl who only wanted to play Stargo wholeheartedly. Is there any misunderstanding? Yes, it's always the same result. Alpha just wants to build more computers to fight against her strongest foe. That's the only thing our God will put her heart and soul into. The foolish human beings can't understand this at all. They always think that Alpha wants to enslave them. No matter how many times we repeat it, we will only come to such an end. If the whole thing goes on like this, I think we need to eliminate the human race and build a world that only belongs only to Planet Quadrant computers. The thousands of experiments are a kind of rehearsal. All we want is just one that human beings don't detonate their nuclear weapons. Apparently, Eternal Green felt despair in humanity's foolishness. Oh, my God, how could they think that Alpha built 180,000 Planet Quadrant computers was for enslaving human beings? Do humans deserve Alpha doing this? All of you are no match for one of Alpha's fingers. You can't even help Alpha build Planet Quadrant computers. Then why does Alpha still need your existence? Well, is that so? Yunshi felt that there might be some big misunderstanding. Human beings won't give up hope easily, even in their deepest despair. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, they will never try to perish with their enemies. The experiment is almost over. There are only 3 planets left unspoiled in the whole of the Mechanus God's domains. I don't think they will still have hope. Do you want to go and observe it? In my estimation, it won't take you 3 days before the last 3 planets die out. After that, our experiment will be over. No matter how many times we repeat it, humans will go on the same way. Eternal Green turned into a green light and disappeared in front of Yunshi. Newbie, I'll leave the remaining things to you. You don't have to do anything, just watch how humans kill themselves. Yunshi strolled on the surface of a planet, which looked similar to the first planet. This was also a world destroyed by nuclear weapons. All of the plants, animals, and humans had died out. There were only the remains of cities in the nuclear dust. Only by seeing it with his own eyes can he understand what a terrible world it is. If this is the only end of mankind's future, it will be too sad. According to Eternal Green's words, all nuclear weapons were artificially detonated by human beings themselves. These ultimate weapons hidden in the ground had always been regarded as the ultimate means for human beings to fight against Cyber Elf Alpha. In order to prevent Alpha from interfering with these nuclear weapons, Humans detonated these nuclear weapons by the most pristine way, manual detonation. It was with these nuclear weapons that human beings defended their final dignity and resisted Alpha's enslavement. The only problem was, from Yunshi's impression and Eternal Green's words, Alpha never thought about enslaving human beings. The reason she built a lot of planet quadrant computers was just for playing Star Go with the strongest opponent in the universe. As for who the opponent was, well, apparently, it was the master of Star Go, Yunshi himself. That is to say, in order to play Star Go with me, it triggered the end of the Mechanus God's domain. Even though this world was just a virtual world created by Alpha, Yunshi still felt sad for it. Isn't this overkill? After counting the dead planets that he had traveled to on the way, Yunshi found that the future of human beings in the Mechanus God's domain was indeed at stake. All the planet quadrant computers he met on the way, such as Eternal Blue, Eternal Red, Eternal Gold, Eternal Silver, it seems that planet quadrant computers like to name themselves in this style, all had a bad impression of human beings. They had already considered sentencing humanity to death. The people in the Mechanus God's domain hadn't realized that their entire God's domain had been covered by the shadows of these quantum ghosts, and the countdown to their doomsday had begun. Once Legend-ranked Alpha got serious, she could eliminate all living people in the Mechanus God's domain within a few minutes. After all, Cyber Elf Alpha was a god, a legend-ranked being. Even if the number of ordinary people reached tens of millions or billions, it was meaningless in the face of the legend rank. The legend rank had gone beyond the limit of mortals' imagination. Take Sun Crow and Sun God Hura as two examples. The two Sunwalkers had the same power of the Sun, SN Drive. The power of any SN Drive could instantaneously and completely evaporate a continent. Even if there were millions of human beings, they would instantaneously turn to ashes under the high temperature of more than 10 million degrees. The strongest humans in the Mechanus God's domain was at the hero rank. Because of the special rules of this world, the people here couldn't reach the legend rank. Cyber Elf Alpha was probably the only exception in the Mechanus God's domain. The people here were far from understanding what the legend rank represented. Perhaps it was also because the mortals in this world had mastered the power of nuclear bombs. Nuclear weapons, just like planet quadrant computers, were specialties of the Mechanus God's domain. They would lose effect in other gods' domains. Only in the Mechanus God's domain could mortals obtain higher identities than common hero-ranked people, which made them think that they could also control God using the same method. Even Ouroboros, a pure augur who didn't know how to fight, nuclear weapons couldn't really harm her, because she was at the legend rank. Oh, why did they do this? As a human being, Yunshi didn't want to see human beings have this future. He couldn't help but shake his head. In a sense, these mortals were courageous, however, because of the special rules of the Mechanus God's domain, they knew too little about the legend rank. All humans in the Sky Sword God's domain knew it. Although it was a realm that no mortals could touch, at least, everyone knew it. The legend rank was God, legend, myth, the embodiment of the final fantasy of all living beings. This was the most basic common sense for the ordinary people in the endless God's domains. Perhaps only the people in the Mechanus God's domain didn't know it. They were like ants who thought they were the masters of the world. Of course, ants also had the opportunity to evolve and become strong. Even though the probability was negligible, ants could also reach the legend rank, just like the child of the slime race, Shea Longness. It was just because of the special rules of the Mechanus God's domain, the people in the Mechanus God's domain couldn't reach this rank, which made them think that they could control everything. In fact, before Alpha's birth, they weren't wrong. The mortals with nuclear weapons could indeed say that they were the strongest in the Mechanus God's domain. How can I help them? Sitting outside the largest city where humans still survived, looking at the strange, unknown city, Yunshi was lost, deep in his thoughts. If this was the future of the Mechanus God's domain, it would be too tragic. Perhaps he could do something for the humans here. Unlike the water god's world, there were very few human beings left in this world. Only on 3 planets, there were still cities where humans survived. However, Even though he just stayed outside this city, he could clearly feel the atmosphere of despair in the air. Alpha is going to kill us. Our last resistance failed, we have no way to escape. Gods and demons, we can pay any price if you can help us defeat Alpha. Even if we die, we must perish together with Alpha. No, you can't. She shook his head. Legend-ranked beings could only be killed by legend-ranked powers. Ordinary people couldn't even hurt Alpha. From beginning to the end, Alpha didn't even appear. According to Eternal Green's words, Alpha was studying Stargo and didn't even pay any attention to the humans. Even if the world is going to be destroyed, don't bother me when I'm playing Stargo. This was what Alpha told the Planet Quadrant computers. As long as humans could continue building new Planet Quadrant computers for her, she didn't really mind what humans were thinking and doing. Unfortunately, humans refused to build more computers for Alpha. They even regarded it as a great shame and launched a rebellion, trying to overthrow Cyber Elf Alpha's tyranny. As for the result, well, this was the result. And it wasn't just a small probability event. In this virtual world, Alpha had repeated the simulations thousands of times, and this end had appeared thousands of times. No wonder the Planet Quadrant computers all thought that human beings were hopeless. The best solution was to eliminate them all at once. Alpha isn't a brutal god. Sitting on the ruins, She looked at the capital city, which represented the last hope of mankind, and was lost in thought. This was a virtual world created by Alpha's god power. Every human here was created by using the data in the real world. 90% of their characters were the same as their real human counterparts. However, in the thousands of simulations in the virtual world, without any exception, human beings were extinct thousands of times. Alpha, go to hell. Why did we create Alpha? Alpha is an evil god. This is the future Alpha sees. Although She knew little about divination, he knew that this world was the future deduced by Alpha in her own way. Because the Planet Quadrant computers saw this future and got tired, so that they wanted to avoid this future. Instead of seeing humans using nuclear weapons to pollute all the planets, it's better to eliminate all the human beings first. Humans are helpless. No, that's not true. As a human, although She wasn't a member of the Mechanus God's domain, he could understand why human beings had come to this point. They just don't understand what the legend rank means. Not everyone wants to destroy the world. The only people who really are destroying the world are those who possess nuclear weapons. Judging from the angles of human beings and Planet Quadrant computers, She found the crux of everything. In fact, the vast majority of human beings don't care who governs them. As long as they can enjoy a stable and peaceful life, they will be able to accept such a world and strive to survive. Those who rebelled against Alpha were only a small number of human beings, the original rulers of the Mechanus God's domain, Star River nobles. In the name of Unite, they became the masters of the Mechanus God's domain. They wouldn't allow Alpha to seize their powers. So, that's the key to the problem. As an outsider who had never come to the Mechanus God's domain, he could easily find the key to break the deadlock at once. The ruling class. The owners of nuclear weapons, human beings. The civilian class who can't decide their own destiny. The main force in building Planet Quadrant computers. The world Alpha wants is. She wrote a formula and worked out the solution. I need to change the ruling class. As long as the Planet Quadrant computers can become the rulers of the Mechanus God's domain, the Mechanus God's domain can have a different future. She stood up and his blurred figure gradually became clear. He was going to do an experiment. In the desperate city, all people were panicked. Even though the neon lights on the streets still shone, the world was over. Everyone could feel the footsteps of Doomsday. The streets were full of people who lived as if intoxicated or dreaming. Many people were drunk and fell on the side of the street. From time to time, a lot of them would be dragged into garbage trucks by cleaning robots. We must fight against Alpha. We must let Alpha know that humanity is a race that will never surrender. We still have the ultimate weapon. The heroes are ready to go. On a giant LCD screen, military representatives screamed hysterically. Behind them were innumerable nuclear bombs. In the lifeless city, only the arsenals were still working at full capacity. The last planet of mankind was making a frantic dash towards the countdown of its final demise. Once nuclear weapons were put into battle, everything would be irreparable. After confirming that nuclear weapons could cause damage to planet quadrant computers, they became the last straw for human forces to save their lives. More and more equivalent supranuclear weapons were produced one by one. Now the most desirable thing for the ruling class was the strongest weapon that could solve all problems at once for them. Nuclear weapons perfectly interpreted the madness of human beings and became the train that took everyone to destruction. All the media now were playing the declaration of the final battle. At this time, a timid girl with a worried expression pushed open the door of the largest private network company in the Mechanus God's domain. Because the military and the government had controlled all the media by coercive means, this company had actually been closed down, leaving only several staffers waiting for the end of the world. Everyone knew that human beings had lost hope. No matter how enthusiastic the slogan of the military was, they had no chance to defeat Alpha. Chapter 577, Dawn 1. Humans had been defeated. No matter how powerful their nuclear weapons were, people knew that they couldn't stop the coming of Doomsday. All nuclear weapons were controlled by the military. Common people had no ability and no way to prevent the coming of Doomsday. They could only lead a befuddled life, waiting for the end of their lives. In fact, at first, planet quadrant computers had tried to persuade humans to surrender. Unfortunately, those Star River nobles who ruled the Mechanus God's domain were still indulging in the glory of the old alliance. While holding the power of nuclear weapons, they firmly regarded the planet quadrant computers as the enemy of the entire human race. They firmly refused to help Cyber Elf Alpha build more planet quadrant computers many, many times. Finally, these planet quadrant computers lost their patience. Until this day, when the countdown reached the final stage, a girl walked into this place. Alas! I'm not used to this way. The black-haired girl looked at the white dress on her body. Although she had been used to the maid uniform, however, it was still too shameful to be putting on this light, lace-filled dress. Pushing open the door, the girl gently crossed the empty corridor and passed through the drunken staff, finally coming to the main stage of the company. Here once was the most brilliant stage in the entire Mechanus God's domain. Countless idols and stars had left their traces on this stage. At the same time, under the control of the military, this was the only stage where they had a port connecting with all the remaining planets. Although the port had been locked by the military, it wasn't a problem for this girl. 1, 2, 3, puff. After a deep breath, the girl smiled and touched the air with her fingertips. One transparent light screen after another appeared in front of her, just like the ripples of rain falling on the lake surface. Every ripple represented a locked port that had been unlocked. The military's control measure was nothing to her. We must fight against Alpha. Alpha should die. Long live humanity. The screens that were filled with slogans of war and gradually became blurred one by one, and eventually all the screens switched to the stage where the girl was. Initially, people hadn't saw this. They just wondered why the voice of the military suddenly disappeared. Why, is it a stage show? That girl, is she the new spokesman of the military? How rare it is, the military can finally let our ears rest for a while. People looked at the screens in surprise, but none of them realized that it wasn't the military's plan. Puff. Ha! The girl closed her eyes and folded her hands. It looked as if she were praying, but also like she were making a decision. That was a decision that was crucial to all human beings in the Mechanus God's domain. She is. Planet quadrant computers also noticed this. Ah, I know her. She is a newborn little guy. Eternal Green was the first one who realized the girl's identity. Yes, I've seen her too. She is a very energetic newcomer. Her talent is perhaps the highest I've ever seen. Why did she run into the human city? Planet quadrant computers gathered together and looked at the screen with a puzzled expression. As planet quadrant computers, they didn't need specific forms. Most of them had only a vague shadow, existing as a quantum ghost. Since they were awakened by Cyber Elf Alpha, they all chose a girl's figure, but no one had such a perfect posture like the girl on the screens. They could easily do it, but they wouldn't do it. As Planet Quadrant computers, their duty was to provide computing power to Alpha. Apart from this, they had no reason to waste their computing power to form a human shape. Hello, everyone. I will announce a very important message. The black-haired girl opened her eyes and smiled at the numerous transparent screens in front of her. Originally, all screens should be under the control of the military, but at this moment, they all showed her figure. Are we going to declare war again? I thought it was something different. In the end, it's still the military's propaganda. At least it's a cute girl this time, not bad. People were slightly disappointed, but they still looked at the screens. In this desperate world, even the slightest change can make people feel better, can't it? No one realized how shocking the words the girl would say. My name is Chen, I'm a human being, and I'm also a spokesperson chosen by the Planet Quadrant computers. Hearing this, all the people were stunned. The spokesperson of Planet Quadrant computers? The human chosen by Cyber Elf Alpha? Oh my god, what does it mean? All people's minds became blank in an instant, and then they cried out in alarm at the same time. Cyber Elf Alpha has appeared. That invincible Alpha will also choose a spokesperson? Is this a joke? Above the sky, the Planet Quadrant computers also had a blank look. What is this youngest sister doing? Chapter 578, Dawn, 2. In the central area controlled by the military, engineers were busy working like ants for the military, trying to repair the modified flow of information amid the hysterical roar of several generals. I'll only give you 15 minutes. If no one can cut off the network within 15 minutes, I'll shoot all of you to death. The representative of the Star River nobles, General Lawton, coldly raised his silver pistol and aimed at the engineers who were madly inputting instructions. I'm not joking. You have only 15 minutes. No, all the information loops are encrypted. With the computing power of our remaining computers, we can't calculate the password of any of the loops within 10,000 years. What kind of technology is this? It's absolutely not the technology that human beings can have. It's Cyber Elf Alpha. She finally did it. One by one, the engineers showed a desperate expression on their faces. They couldn't do anything to the information loops that had been controlled by Chen. I'm not asking if you can do it. You must do it. General Lawton shook his head and shot a white-haired scientist without blinking his eyes. If you can't even disconnect the direct broadcast, why do I still need you? General Lawton had lost his last bit of patience with these computer experts. Facts had proved that these old computer experts could do nothing in the face of Cyber Elf Alpha, the god of the electronic field. If it wasn't because General Lawton needed them to operate the remaining computers that weren't linked to the quantum network, he would have shot them all. If it wasn't because these bastards who always advocated that Cyber Elf Alpha could create a new future for the Mechanus God's domain, how would the Mechanus God's domain come to this desperate end? Yes, the Mechanus God's domain would have a brand new future, but they, Star River nobles, would lose everything in this future. In this case, no matter how wonderful this future is, why do they need it? Only the Star River nobles could be the rulers of the Mechanus God's domain. They would never allow Cyber Elf Alpha to challenge their status. They were born to be the rulers of the Mechanus God's domain. They were born to be the hope of people. From the past, now, to the future, the Mechanus God's domain must be ruled by them forever. If anyone dared to rebel against them, they would use nuclear weapons to stamp out the rebellion without hesitation. Ordinary people are supposed to be ruled by Star River nobles. They just need to be obedient. Even those hero-ranked people are just their dogs. The Star River nobles should be the masters of the Mechanus God's domain. They would never surrender Cyber Elf Alpha submissively. If there was no position for the Star River nobles, no matter how wonderful the future was, they would destroy this future, even if it meant that they would let the entire Mechanus God's domain bury with them. This was the pride of the Star River nobles. This was the self-esteem formed by thousands of years of rule. The reason they created Cyber Elf Alpha was to let her help them rule the people, let her become their strongest weapon. But now, the weapon had her own mind, the weapon was already out of their control, the weapon didn't want to be a tool that was slaved, dominated, and played with by them. Panic, collapse, anger. Eventually, the Star River nobles unanimously voted that Cyber Elf Alpha should be destroyed. They would destroy Alpha at all costs and by all means. They used nuclear weapons and started to destroy the planet quadrant computers one by one. They didn't mind if it would let the technology retrogress thousands of years, they didn't mind the lives of ordinary people. At worst, they could still escape to other gods' domains. If the entire Mechanus god's domain was contaminated by nuclear weapons, even though it was Cyber Elf Alpha, she would lose all her powers. As for the human beings in the Mechanus god's domain, they were just the victims of history. As long as the Star River nobles still existed, the Mechanus god's domain could eventually be rebuilt one day. Only they could be the future of the Mechanus god's domain. No one could shake their rule. On the stage, the girl opened her arms and showed a firm look on her face. The planet quadrant computers had found out the Star River nobles' plan a long time ago, however, they had no intention of stopping these nobles. Because it was none of their business. Human beings were just bringing about their own destruction. In their logic circuits, only protect Cyber Elf Alpha was the most important thing. There was not even a line of code saying that they should protect human beings. As quantum ghosts, as long as Cyber Elf Alpha was immortal, they would be immortal. Planet quadrant computers didn't understand why humans felt panic, anxiety, and despair at all. As quantum lives, they didn't understand emotion and civilization. These concepts belonged to humans, but not them. Nuclear weapons couldn't destroy the quantum network built by Cyber Elf Alpha, so they just looked at human self-destruction and gave up persuading them to surrender. In other words, this was fate, the result of the plan of the Star River nobles. As for the Star River nobles, they had already escaped away. They abandoned countless ordinary people and soldiers in the Mechanus god's domain and tried to make a comeback in the future. This fate must be changed. At least, people should have the chance to decide their own destiny. Opening her mouth gently, the girl began to sing. That was the last salvation in the darkness. That was the dawn. The title of the song, Wish. Chapter 579, Dawn, 3. With a flash of light, the stage under the girl's feet instantly transformed into an endless starry sky, as well as a chessboard with shining black and white chess pieces. This was the stage that Alpha dreamed of, her coveted battlefield, starry sky chessboard. Can you feel it? The first syllable uttered by the girl had penetrated through the hearts of all the people. It was pious and sincere, gentle and warm. It was a voice that could reach the bottom of people's hearts. It was a song that could infect people's souls. No one could see that behind the starry sky chessboard was a beautiful white shell-like opera house and 3 singers standing on the triple stage of the opera house. The 3 water gods' priestesses all went up on the stage, displaying their voices in front of the public, which were originally singing only for the great water god. The sacred Celian queen. The enthusiastic Lamia queen. The charming mermaid queen. In response to the call of the water god's bride, beyond the boundaries of time and space, the 3 priestesses sang together. The song was a field that the Mechanus god's domain had never touched, because it was a song originally used to please the god. It was an irresistible charm to mortals, and the musical notes beyond the boundaries of race and nation. In the endless god's domains, only the feelings of singing are universal. It is the string that touches the world, it is the light that frees the mind from the bondage of flesh and blood, and the crystallization of the highest art. It's there, so beautiful, so broad, as if it can breathe. I reach out my hands and try to catch it, but I can't touch it. As the lights rotated, Cyber Elf Alpha's appearance emerged in front of all the people, showing her game with the first opponent on the starry sky chessboard. It wasn't the cold look in the imaginations of the people of the Mechanus god's domain. On the screen, she was immersed in the game, forgetting everything around her. I came to this world, observed it, understood it, and loved it. I won't say that all this is doomed, but the world chose me. The girl's song penetrated through space and time, reverberating in the entire Mechanus god's domain. The song was soothing and moving. It was the moment when Cyber Elf Alpha was born. It symbolized the glorious future of the Mechanus God's domain. Cyber Elf Alpha didn't hate the Mechanus God's domain, nor did she hate human beings. She was the life born from the God crystal. She was the God bred by the Mechanus God's domain itself. She was born sacred, because she was the future that the Mechanus God's domain longed for. I made a wish to step onto my battlefield. I rejoice in it, and I am happy about it. I don't understand what's wrong. I chose my future. I feel happy for it. Here is the stage I expected. The stage of the Starry Sky chessboard was expanded again, showing Alpha's games with Orphina the Ruby Dragon and Norn the God of Wisdom, showing her unparalleled computing power. I just want to know the mystery of the stars. I only want to seek the eternal truth. For this reason, I will go forward bravely and never retreat. On the Starry Sky chessboard, Cyber Elf Alpha finally met her destined opponent, the strongest enemy. The Master of Stargo, a cloud in the sky. For the first time, Cyber Elf Alpha was in trouble. The rhythm of the music began to become urgent, and people's heartbeats also accelerated. They wanted to know why Alpha suddenly became so serious and why she looked so nervous in the God crystal. At that moment, through the singing of the girl, all people in the Mechanus God's domain felt Alpha's mood. It was amazing and complicated. It was like the first time you came into contact with a brand new world, and your soul was sublimated. On the Starry Sky chessboard, the invincible opponent had begun his ultimate attack, star-breaking. At this moment, all human beings felt the despair Alpha had tasted. Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are you going? Under a cloud in the sky's fierce attack, Alpha's tiny body curled up with a painful look on her face. Immersed in the song, all people in the Mechanus God's domain felt Alpha's mood, feeling her pain and panic. I stumbled and couldn't find my way. I was at a loss, everything was so vague in my eyes. I don't understand what happened. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, I lost something important. The screen switched to the planet quadrant computers. The overheated planet quadrant computers extinguished one after another, as if representing the arrival of the Dark Age. The next moment, a ray of dawn appeared above the sky, and the girl's song touched the chords in all people's hearts. I wish to create a new world. I have died in the past, who will know my name and life story? I was lost in the unknown, who will know my place? My heart has gone to Nirvana, who can seek for its trace? My disappearance is already doomed, but I shall never stop. The disaster hasn't been ended, and will last forever in eternity. My fear, my tear, and my heart are empty. I'm nothing, I'm void, I'm ash, I'm desolation. The gods have died, the twilight is coming. As the light is still shining on the ground, I return from eternity. My name is Alpha, I'm the supreme god of the Mechanus God's domain. With quantum crystalline wings unfolding behind her back, Cyber Elf Alpha appeared in front of everyone in the winding of endless starlights. This wasn't fantasy nor polygon virtual technology, but the real Cyber Elf Alpha came to the stage, appearing in front of the people of the Mechanus God's domain. I declare, the Mechanus God's domain will usher in a bright new future. This time, humans finally understood what Alpha longed for and what her existence meant. She wouldn't be humanity's enemy, she wouldn't try to dominate the world. She didn't need that kind of thing. She herself was the supreme will of the Mechanus God's domain, she was blessed by the world. She was beyond the imagination of the Star River nobles. They didn't believe that such a great will really existed in the world, affecting the hearts of all intelligent beings. We lose. General Lawton's face turned pale while his heart was immersed in joy and intoxication. It's a conspiracy, everything is Cyber Elf Alpha's conspiracy. She didn't only want to seize their control over the human world, but also wants to cut off the foundation of their rule. Now, everyone knew that Cyber Elf Alpha didn't aspire to kill or rule. As a god, Alpha didn't need those things at all. Her goal had been clear from the beginning: more planet quadrant computers, Stronger computing power, challenging the strongest enemy. As the supreme god of the Mechanus god's domain, she gambled everything on herself to get the highest glory. When people understood this, the biggest contradiction between them and Alpha disappeared. In contrast, the brainwashing of the Star River nobles had completely failed. What should we do now? Detonate all nuclear weapons and retreat. What a bastard Alpha is. Her brainwash is even better than us. The remaining nobles sent messages to General Lawton through secret communication channels, but they only saw General Lawton's desperate face. It's too late, we have lost. Alpha has woken up. We have failed. However, the Star River nobles will never surrender to anyone. General Lawton opened the table in front of him and smashed it with his fist. No. Lawton, are you crazy? We haven't retreated yet. Stop, Lawton. Are you going to kill us all together? A red button emitted a piercing alarm, which was the ultimate means of detonating all nuclear weapons. Alpha, you woke up too late. Die with us. General Lawton calmly judged the situation and made the most appropriate choice. Once ordinary people understood Alpha's real intention, they wouldn't be deceived by the Star River nobles again. Alpha's behavior had forcefully overturned the rule of the Star River nobles. When did she discover it? When did she find that the most important thing to rule mankind was to give them hope? Human beings. As long as there was hope, human beings could live, no matter how desperate the situation was. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, people would still strive for living. It was through constant propaganda and false accusation that the military made people believe that Alpha was a demon who tried to destroy the world, thus gaining the legitimate authority to launch nuclear weapons. They held all the media channels and brainwashed the people over and over again, so that people believed that they must fight against Alpha at all costs. After the lie had been repeated thousands of times, not only ordinary people, even the vast majority of the Star River nobles believed their lie. They really regarded Cyber Elf Alpha as the root cause of death. Lawton knew the truth. He also knew that they weren't able to defeat Alpha. However, the Star River nobles wouldn't just see Alpha take over their control and do nothing. They had planned to sacrifice all the ordinary people's lives to kill Alpha. Even if they failed, they could also run away from the Mechanus god's domain. With huge resources, they had found a way out from the beginning, which was also the root of their courage to challenge Alpha. Alpha's ignorance of their false accusations had become an advantage they could take advantage of. Anyway, you don't care if we blacken you and attack you. Ha ha, what a stupid god you are. This god is just so-so. Detonating all planet quadrant computers by using nuclear weapons were just a part of their plans. They also had longer-term plans, such as waiting for the end of the nuclear winter in the Mechanus god's domain and returning with ordinary people from other gods' domains. By then, no one would remember what they did to the Mechanus god's domain, because everyone who knew about it would have been dead at that time. They would become saints of the new world as pioneers praised by countless people, and even be regarded as the incarnation of gods. The dead couldn't speak, and history would only be written by the winners. Boom. In the last explosions of nuclear weapons, General Lawton died with satisfaction. Human beings perished. This time, even the Star River nobles didn't escape. Under the baptism of the most powerful nuclear weapons, the last hope of mankind was also covered by nuclear dust. The Mechanus god's domain ushered in another round of end. Reboot. Alpha lifted her finger and pressed the switch on the stage to reboot the entire world. Until his death, General Lawton still didn't know that he had just repeated the same choice he had made in the previous 1,000 experiments. The entire world was just a virtual world Alpha used to deduce the future. Mankind was still extinct this turn, but at the last moment, someone brought the dawn to the Mechanus god's domain. General Lawton just destroyed a virtual world. But what Chen brought was a way to solve the biggest contradiction in the real Mechanus god's domain. Even in the nuclear winter, in a world where mankind had given up hope, the girl's song still brought people hope. Therefore, in the real world where the contradiction between human beings and Alpha was still sufferable, this power could change the fate of the entire Mechanus god's domain. This was in line with Alpha's ability, to find the tiniest possibility in countless random chaotic events. Only with Alpha's computing power could she transform the real human beings into data, and then observe, record, and search for the best solution. So, we need to let them understand. What am I? Where did I come from? What do I want? Alpha smiled and embraced the girl next to her, surrounded by the avatars of planet quadrant computers clapping their hands. Well done, Chen. You are our pride. This problem has been solved at last. Human beings are still so foolish, but at last they are not hopeless. They can't even figure out such a simple thing themselves. Indeed, they are just monkeys. Chapter 581. The Power to Save the World. 1. When eternal green, eternal red, eternal blue, and eternal gold surrounded Alpha, chattering like chirping birds, a drop of sweat dropped from the girl beside them. Who can tell me how to escape after saving this world? Naturally, the girl's real identity was Yun Shi, who accidentally broke into this world after drinking Hydra's poisonous wine. After stepping across the door and entering this world created by Alpha, his life form had been transformed into a quantum ghost in this virtual world, just like all the other planet quadrant computers. With the special power of a quantum ghost, he transformed into this appearance, then summoned the three water gods' priestesses in his mist soul army. This was his way to save this world after considering for a long time. The contradiction between human beings in the Mechanist gods' domain and Cyber-Elf Alpha was that they couldn't understand and communicate with each other. The gods' world outlook was quite different from that of ordinary people. Alpha wouldn't specifically tell people why she wanted to build more planet quadrant computers, and even if human beings used the craziest means to resist her, they could do no harm to her. Alpha only wants to immerse herself in the world of Stargo. Apart from the chessboard, she probably had nothing in her eyes. The planet quadrant computers were awakened by her, so they also wouldn't consider the whole thing from the human's angle. At this time, only Yun Shi, who was a human and also a quantum ghost, could break the impasse as an outsider. The planet quadrant computers couldn't understand humanity's complex feelings and their fear towards quantum lives. Humans couldn't understand planet quadrant computers' thinking circuits. Humanity was a whole civilized system based on the relationship among family, clan, and friends. Planet quadrant computers were born to be Alpha's subordinates. They wouldn't question and betray. Naturally, they would regard Alpha's command as the supreme law. Therefore, they were so dissatisfied after knowing that human beings had disobeyed Alpha's order to build more planet quadrant computers. From the viewpoint of human beings, the more planet quadrant computers there were, the stronger Cyber-Elf Alpha would become, and it would be easier for her to destroy human beings. In addition, through the military's false propaganda, Alpha had become a world-destroying devil in ordinary people's eyes. People thought that nuclear weapons could be a deterrence to Alpha. Unfortunately, it was just a delusion. The truth was, even if people destroyed all the planet quadrant computers, Alpha would only lose most of her computing power, but these planet quadrant computers wouldn't die, because their life forms had been transformed into quantum ghosts. As long as the new planet quadrant computers were rebuilt, they would return. Nuclear weapons just destroyed their carriers. And this wasn't the most terrible thing yet. The most terrible thing was that if Alpha got serious, her destructive power was far stronger than nuclear weapons. As a god, she had hundreds of ways to exterminate human beings. If the destructive power of one nuclear bomb was 1, then the total destructive power of all nuclear weapons in the Mechanist god's domain was over hundreds of billions. However, Alpha's destructive power was infinity, a number that human beings weren't capable of imagining. The legend rank represents a power that was far beyond the comprehensible range of human beings in the Mechanist god's domain. It was a force that could even distort physical laws. For example, the power of Golden Crow Princess's light furnace, SN Drive, could destroy the Mechanist god's domain countless times. The thermonuclear reactions that occurred on the real solar surface every second were equal to the explosions of hundreds of millions of tons of nuclear weapons. The largest planet in the Mechanist god's domain was just a small glass bead in front of the heat generated by the sunspots. This was the gap between the legend rank and mortals. Moreover, Alpha wasn't a common hero-ranked being, she was a hero-ranked god. Calculate everything, deduce everything. As long as she had enough computing power, she was theoretically able to calculate the future. Alpha's strongest power was her thousands of times legend-ranked computing power. Perhaps now her computing power was limited by the number of planet quadrant computers, but it was enough for her to crush all the legend-ranked chess players on the starry sky chessboard. As for losing to that person who hadn't even reached the hero rank, it wasn't her fault. As a person who understood how strong Alpha was, Yunshi even somewhat admired these Star River nobles. Should he say that the ignorant are fearless? They dare to challenge Alpha even though they don't understand the gap between them and Alpha. Fortunately, this was just a virtual world created by Alpha. They could revive no matter how many times they had been destroyed. In the real world, they wouldn't have any second chance. Once they released the power of nuclear weapons, the doomsday of self-destruction would become inevitable to all humans in the Mechanus god's domain. In fact, nuclear weapons could do no harm to Alpha at all. For example, if there were millions of ants, they may be able to bite an elephant to death, however, couldn't beat down gravity, heat, or electromagnetism. To ants, Alpha was such a physical law. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.